Good to see everyone here this morning to Savannah. Hope you all had a good evening last night and a good morning so far this morning. We'll get started here. Just one or two things. David Ralston had a conflict. He could not make it to this meeting. And probably about 15-20 minutes ago, I heard from Greg Morris. He's not going to be able to make it. He had a family emergency to occur last night, and we just got word this morning. I don't know any details, but a family issue came up, and so he could not make it. Again, thank all of you for coming. Thanks to the committee members that are here, and Abby and the staff for setting this up here. Great facility and a great event today. We're going to be discussing business incentives as it relates to tourism. We had our first meeting in Cartersville, which was somewhat of an overview of our business incentives and economic development incentives we have in this state. So we have, and from that, we have narrowed it down to a few specific topics that we feel like we can adequately cover in the short time we have to consider these matters. And this is our first topic, dealing with tourism. We have two more planned meetings after this meeting. The one I know will be on October the 11th, and hopefully toward the end of this meeting I'll be able to provide a few more details, and then there will be more to follow. But that meeting we will be looking or concentrating on manufacturing business incentives. And then the last meeting we will have later in October, we will be focusing more on energy-related incentives as well as new technologies-related incentives. So forth. So that's what we have planned right now, long range. And as for this one, more details of those meetings will be forwarded to you as we have things arranged. So we have an agenda. Does anyone need a copy of the agenda? Do you have one? If you want one, where are they? They're right here. All right. If you'd like one, they're right here, available to you. We're going to try to stick pretty close to this agenda. If things happen sooner, that'd be good. If they happen a little later, we obviously have some flexibility in time there, but we do want to make this a day that we don't try to cram too much in at one time. That's why we've spread out the agenda the way we have today. That was largely based on the response that Abby received from those of you who are interested in making some points to us. Before we move into the program, do any of my committee members have any comments they'd like to start out with? No? Well, first we'll start. Jim Sprouse is here. Jim, I'm going to ask you to come up to the podium because he wants to introduce our first speaker, and I'm going to let you do that. So, Jim, go right ahead, and thank you for being here.
Well, thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, the Georgia Hotel and Lodging Association represents the vibrant lodging industry in Georgia, from bed and breakfast inns to fine full-service hotels like this one and everything in between. Our hospitality and tourism industry is Georgia's second largest employer after agribusiness. A healthy hospitality and tourism industry translates to a healthy state economy. We're proud to be partners with the state in making Georgia a welcoming place for visitors, as well as employ thousands of Georgians and pay hundreds of thousands of dollars in a variety of taxes each day. We thank you for the opportunity to allow the Georgia Hotel and Lodging Association to be a part of your examination of the business incentives in Georgia tax code. Several of Georgia's lodging properties have taken advantage of provisions in the Georgia Code which you've enacted over the years. We believe these incentives to be beneficial to the state since jobs are created by the savings we have reinvested in our businesses here in Georgia. We are fortunate to have an expert on the Georgia tax code as a part of our GHLA membership. We would like to have him share with you what he has learned over his long career in helping businesses understand Georgia tax law, particularly as it relates to incentives. I'm convinced his presentation will prompt questions which he will be happy to address. I present to you from LaGrange, Georgia, the GHLA member and my friend Terry McMillan. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. I appreciate that. Well, we wanted to share with you a little bit about Georgia tax credits, some incentives, how they relate to tourism, and some suggestions on how we can improve that. Joy, if you could hit B for me on that, we should be all set up. There we go. Now, after the presentation, I have some handouts. Now, my wife, who is a school teacher, recommends that we don't pass out handouts until after the presentation. So there's a handout here for you and also a flyer on Georgia Hotel and Lodging Association. So we'll leave that up here, Jeff, for everybody to take advantage of.
Very good, thanks.
All right. How many of you can tell me how many tax credits? Oh, sure.
Yeah.
That'd be great. Which button is first?
We don't know.
Okay. Now, if I had my 17-year-old son, he would know exactly what to do. He knows more about this technology than I think I ever will. But how many can tell me how many tax credits we have actually in the state of Georgia? Now, you can't answer that. Anybody want to venture a guess?
Too many.
Too many.
Too many to administer.
Not enough.
How about too many that aren't clear enough for us, that are in the gray area?
There's a lot of them.
Yes, they need to be defined a little bit. Anybody want to know about a number? Now, Dawn Sturbaum, who used to be with the Department of Revenue, she's now with the Department of Community Affairs, told me this number. It's actually 31. She said that's the number you want to use in the state of Georgia. By contrast, with our surrounding states that compete with us for business, does any state have more tax credits than we do? North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, Alabama? Anybody want to venture a guess? Who has a larger number than we do? Now, if you guess and you're close, there's a, please? He mentions Florida. Anybody want to mention North Carolina?
Definitely.
Okay, Joy mentioned North Carolina, so as a result of that, we're going to give her $1 million. Okay? So Joy,
Oh, awesome.
that's for you.
I'll donate it to the charity.
If you take it to Walmart, they'll cash it, so don't take it to Walmart. All right, let's see if we can hit the right button. Okay. Oh, that must be the right one. Really, if you look at economic development in the state of Georgia, what's the economic engine that we have? It's your small to medium-sized business. They really drive the economy. So some of this is addressing the small to medium-sized business incentives that they can take advantage of, but they currently are not able to. There's an idea for you of some of the surrounding states and the number of tax credits that they have and where we fall. And you can see we're pretty good. North Carolina has a few more than we do, but the federal, there's only 28 in the federal size. So we stand in pretty good. Are they important, and do they do the job? Do tax credits really work, and do they do the job? And let me just mention, I don't know if you read the Atlantic Journal-Constitution last week, where they talk about job credits in here specifically. And they talk about hundreds of millions of dollars given away in job credits, and they don't know if they do their job or not. Well, I can tell you they do their job, and it's not hundreds of millions of dollars. According to the audit that was just put out in July of this year, we give away about $25 million a year. That is not hundreds of millions. I'm not sure where they get all their figures, but it's not hundreds of millions. Do they do their job? Absolutely. I can tell you of a company that's in every state in this country, and they expanded in Georgia because of the Georgia job credits. That was the specific reason they expanded here in Georgia, because we have those job credits. Some other surrounding states do not have the job credits that we have. All right. Well, there's 31. We're not going to go into all 31. We just want to give you a sample of them, and some that no longer exist. Now, even in the audit report, it talks about the growth credits, and it mentions it in several different locations here. Has anybody read the audit yet? One person. Two. Okay. Is it completely accurate? Is it slanted?
Slanted.
Absolutely slanted. I'd love to see the Department of Revenue respond to this and have that response attached to this. Because this,
Our comments should be there. Or they may have changed. If our comments are not there, they changed it.
well, the
That
comment,
still doesn't mean that the end of the product was slanted. It was slanted.
there's a lot of inaccuracies in this.
They would have us audit every business taxpayer in the state to make sure that the credits are
Yes.
properly applied.
And why would you want to spend that much time when tax credits are only 0.7% of our entire revenue? So they spend a lot of time on something that doesn't amount to a lot. So why they want to do that, I'm not sure, but it looks like they're after somebody in this. The growth credit, they talks a lot about that. Well, we don't even have a growth credit anymore. Anybody know when it ended? January 1st this year. There's no more small business growth tax credit. And that's one of the tax credits that when it was initially designed and written by our lawmakers, it was designed to encourage companies to grow. Now, the problem with it is it was so complicated in order to compute, and it didn't carry forward. I remember going into a company and I said, got some great news for you. You're going to have $500,000 about in small business growth tax credits. And they said, great. And their first response was, we can add more people now. Okay, I worked with their CPA. They were able to use $19,000. That's all. And it did not carry forward. They didn't add those jobs because that credit didn't carry forward. That's too bad. So they stopped the credit as of January 1st this year. Not many companies used it. They didn't understand it. And by the time you went through all the rigmarole to compute what you had, you weren't able to use much of it. So it was a tax credit that had a good point to it, but it wasn't designed to help business. So, that's okay.
I was trying to get rid of that budget.
Oh, that's right. You can, we can take it. to the next
She's just
one.
trying to speed you up.
That's fine. My wife does that all the time. Why pursue tax credits? And I'm going to comment more on what type of benefit do they have for our companies. Well, the first one is profit. If the state of Georgia and our economic development department can help our companies become more profitable, they're going to stay in business. Profit drives an organization. If you don't have profit, they aren't going to be in business. And we want these small to medium-sized businesses to stay in business. We want them to stay in Georgia. We want them to grow and expand in Georgia. Well, it gives them a lot of budget flexibility, too. The retraining tax credit, by the way, which is not hardly mentioned in this at all, which is too bad. They mentioned the basic skills tax credit in the audit, but not many people use the basic skills credit. Not only that, try to find somebody in the state that knows something about the basic skills tax credit. Extremely difficult to find that. But it gives them a return on investment that's great because they can invest in training. I can tell you companies that take what we get for them in tax credits and use that for their training budget for the coming year. So does it do the job? Absolutely. I've worked in 29 states so far in the country because we handle all state and all federal tax credits. I'll put Georgia at the top of any of them. I'll put Georgia against anybody. We have a great program, and it helps business. Well, how about a better skilled workforce? Is that important to us? Absolutely. When you mention Georgia Quick Start, right away, people's eyes light up, especially in business. It's a great program, does a great job. And the last one, we're talking about profitability. So we want these three bold items to be part of economic development. We want the business to stay in business. We want them to expand in Georgia, and we want to maintain Georgia jobs. We do that, we're increasing revenue. All right. Can Georgia companies use all the tax credits they get? And I say yes for the most part. Now, some of the tax credits are good for up to 50% of a company's liability. Some are good for the other 50%. The retraining credit's good for 50%. Job credits, it depends on the tier county you're in. We've got 4 tiers. If you're in tier 1 or 2, you can use it against 100% of your tax liability. In some cases, you can use it for withholding, against withholding, which is a great concept. That concept needs to be expanded. But what if a company is operating at a loss due to heavy investments in equipment or expansion? And we run into that a lot with especially manufacturing companies. They want to grow, they want to expand, they want to add more jobs in Georgia, which increases the revenue to the state of Georgia, and yet they're not able to use tax credits because they're operating an NOL, net operating loss. So how can we address that situation? Hotels especially, they have to expand and grow. Well, if they expand and grow and they're showing a net operating loss, what good are tax credits if they can't use it against withholding? And that's a key area. Now, we only have one tax credit, one in the state of Georgia, that applies to every company out there that's for profit. And that's the retraining tax credit. That's the only one. All the other ones are for preferred industries. So it's geared towards, if you're in one of those 6 favored industries that we have in the state of Georgia, great. You're open to a lot more tax credits. If you're not, you're only open to one. And hotels, for the most part, they have one. That's about it. That's a retraining tax credit. So that's a great tax credit. It does a great job. It needs to be defined more. That tax credit is approved by the vice presidents of economic development at your technical schools. And how many technical schools do we have? About 31? 34. Oh, good. Who said that? Oh.
I think we had to say one.
Okay. Jim, would you mind giving her $1 million?
Certainly.
Thank you. I'm going to go home.
Yeah. All right, 34. That means you have 34 different people that approve these tax credits. That also means you have 34 different opinions on what's approvable and what's not out there. There is not a lot of consistency out there, generally speaking. So that's one area that could be addressed with that. Job tax credits, well, we leave out hotels because generally they can't add enough people to qualify for the credits. If they're in a Tier 4 county, you have to add 25 new jobs. That's a pretty big property. And a lot of people at hotels are part-time. So in order for them to meet the goal, they're left out in most cases. Investment credit, now that's only for 2 industries. What are they? Manufacturing. That's the #1 preferred industry in most states in this country. In Georgia, we also include telecommunications. Well, why don't we include hotels? Hotels, on a regular basis, have to remodel. They have to remodel their rooms, their facades, in order to remain competitive and stay in business. Well, they aren't eligible for the investment tax credit. They're excluded from it. Why can't we include them? Now, there's the question I ask. Are tax credits doing their job of economic development? And I'll tell you absolutely yes. And we can give you all kinds of examples of how tax credits are beneficial to companies and how companies use tax credits to stay in business and to expand their business here in Georgia. I didn't see that in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution on how tax credits benefit Georgia. I didn't see it in the audits they conduct. So hopefully they'll ask some questions on how tax credits actually help in economic development, because they do. I can tell you one way. If we eliminate all tax credits in the state of Georgia, I can tell you North Carolina and South Carolina and Florida and Alabama would jump up and down and praise us, because they'd take business away from us. Because that's how we compete with other business. Georgia's has competition. That's the other 49 states. You take away tax credits and grants and incentives, you take away business from the state of Georgia. Now, can it be improved to further economic development? Absolutely. The retraining tax credit focuses on skills for the workforce. Well, what about managers? How many of you can say that we have good managers in all of our industries in the state of Georgia? Don't think so. I taught for many years at the Keller Graduate School. Managers from all over the state of Georgia. Very few of them are any good. Very few. And at the end of our management training course, we gave them this charge. Now that you know how to be a good manager, go out there and train somebody else to be a good manager. So we concentrate on the skilled workforce, but we don't focus on managers. And yet, unless the knowledge, skills, and competencies of our managers improve, how can a workforce improve? Because people do not leave companies, they leave managers. And then the job tax credits. If you look at most hotels in the state of Georgia, most of them have fewer than 100 employees. Most of them. And Jim would probably have some statistics on that. Well, what if we included that group when they added new jobs? For instance, let's say a hotel property had 50 employees, and they were in a Tier 4 county. They said, all right, we'll include you in job credits, but you have to add 25. Now, if your workforce is 50 and you have to add 25 more, is that possible? Probably not. So why not include them by maybe 2 to 5 jobs, depending on tier county? That's reasonable, and that's understandable, and that would encourage further economic development in our hotel and tourism industry. All right? Tax credits against companies withholding. If we expanded that more, tax credits would have a bigger impact. If you look at the number of companies, and I'll take this as accurate, but the number of companies that in 4 years that used the retraining tax credit was only 300. For the jobs credit was only 400. For the investment credit, 260. Now, how many businesses do we have in the state of Georgia? Now, I've heard all kinds of figures from different chambers of commerce, but let's just say we have 150,000 plus. So when you talk about a program that only has 300 companies using one of the most popular tax credits, a retraining tax credit, that's not a big percentage, is it? So if we expanded that somewhat, against withholding, they'd be able to utilize it more. And we're not talking about a big percentage. We're not talking about hundreds of millions of dollars either. We're talking about expansion that will help business. And then the investment tax credits. Well, why don't we expand that to include all the preferred industries? Because we want all industries to expand, don't we? Not just manufacturing and telecommunications, but we want the hotel industry to expand. We want tourism to expand. Why not include them in the investment tax credit? Because they have to invest in their companies in order to expand. All right. Tourism needs good trained managers. They need good managers. A good manager will help an organization grow and expand. We also need to modify the job credits for small to medium-sized business. Last year, our business has expanded so much, I built a new building in downtown LaGrange. I'm a block off the square in downtown LaGrange. Very nice building. Do you know what incentives I got for doing that? And I had people. I got enough room for 20 offices there. I added people, built a new building, bought land. Do you know what incentive I got to do that? Absolutely none. Why? I'm a small business. Doesn't fall in any category for credits. Now, I got retraining credits for some of the new equipment we put in, new systems we put in, but that was it. No job credits, no investment credit, and yet I put over $1 million in there. No incentive for me to do that. Well, I could certainly use that to help me grow and expand as well. Well, hotels have operating losses, especially when they grow and expand and remodel their rooms. They need to be able to use tax credits against withholding. The investment credits, certainly they need that in the hotel and tourism industry because we want that to grow and expand. And the return on investment in tourism to the state of Georgia is incredible. I'm not going to comment on those figures because we have an expert sitting here. But he can tell you how much that impacts the state of Georgia. This you can look at. I just threw in some other states because this is our competition, and we need to understand what our competition does in order to make Georgia a better state for business. And a more attractive state. Florida, North Carolina, South Carolina, they have some interesting tax credits. I just threw up Florida, or federal too, because their tax credits can complement the tax credits in the state of Georgia. You know, we have all three federal location areas: enterprise community, empowerment zone, renewal community. And that complements what we can do in business. That can help our business stay in Georgia because we have those zones. And then I just list some contacts up there. If you have any other questions on that, feel free to call any of us. But there's a lot we can do to help tourism grow and develop in the state of Georgia, and these are just a few suggestions. So I thank you this morning for your time, and I'll have the handouts up here for you.
Terry, thank you. Anybody up here have a question for Terry? I got one. I'd like to mention you earlier. I think earlier in your presentation, you mentioned the small business growth tax credit and mentioned that it expired January 1 of this year. What was there a defined grouping of small businesses that applied toward, or what defined a small business that were eligible for those tax credits?
Well, with the small business growth tax credit, you had to expand your business in the Georgia state tax liability by at least 20% in 3 consecutive years. That's a pretty good growth. I've expanded that much in my business, and yet I can't take advantage of that tax credit right now. But because it was a tax credit that's added after all the other tax credits are included, so if you had retraining tax credits and job credits, that was taken off your liability, then anything left, the small business growth tax credit to be applied to it. So it was after everything else had been done, which means there's not much you can take advantage of with the growth tax credit, and you can't carry it forward. It does not carry forward. Retraining, jobs that carry forward for 10 years. The growth didn't carry forward.
But that would, for a small business, that would apply to a small hotel or motel as well as an office building, as far as meeting the definition or requirements for this tax credit when it existed.
That's pretty gray. It talks about the business enterprises referring to the preferred industries with that. But to grow that much is incredible. You want companies to grow that much in the state of Georgia, because as they grow, they add additional revenue to state coffers.
Exactly. Got a question?
Yes, sir, Terry, if I could. When you talk about they have to grow 3 consecutive years, 20% in their revenue,
In their Georgia state tax liability.
So if they were actually very creative, had a good CPA firm, their tax liability may not grow at 20%, even though their business did grow, correct?
I'm not going to comment on that. I've seen people do a lot of things creatively with numbers.
I understand.
If a company has a lot of carry-forward tax credits, yes, a CPA can restructure things. I've seen businesses in this state that were bought that were the most profitable branch in a corporation's inventory, and yet they show a loss, where the previous year they were most profitable, and this year they show a loss because another company bought them out. And they do creative things with the numbers. I don't know how they do it. I don't even want to know.
Ed probably knows.
Oh.
Thank you. I was just curious. So it's got to be in your tax liability. Okay. Thank you, sir.
If I could,
Representative Mark.
I guess this question slash comment slash mission to send you on, if I could. The question I would have is what credits you would like to see, following that up with how we as a state justify those long term, because anything we do as a tax credit is revenue that we forego in the state, and at the end of the day we want to limit the size of government, limit expenditures, but we all know education, health care costs are going up, and those things are kind of in the budget before we start looking at the budget every year. And I think what Chairman Lewis and Chairman O'Neill in Ways and Means are looking for in this business incentive is, the word we throw out a lot is sustainable. So as we look at these credits, what can Georgia invest, because that's what a tax credit is. It's an investment or partnership with private industry. What can we invest in terms of tax credits make them easy to, if government policy says these are tax credits, I want them easy for people to get. I don't want the department to have to go through a lot of trials and tribulations back and forth with the taxpayer. So the question is, what credits would you like to see? How would you like to see them implemented? And what is the map to long-term benefits of the state? And that's not anything you have to answer today, but I think that's what this committee's looking for as we go to recommend policy to the legislature next year. This is what we would give up in the next 2 or 3 years as a state over credits, or 5 or 10 years because business have to plan. But over the next 5, 10, and 15 years, this is what those businesses do and bring in, and here's where tax revenues come. Because I think failing to do that as we implement new credits or new exemptions or whatever, we get into a place where we were in the AJC article last week. $9.8 billion the state let go because of exemptions. What we fail to realize is how much of that business might not have even located to the state were those exemptions not in place to bring it here. So I think if we do those going in, if you could help us with that and the industry you're most interested in, and we're going to ask, I believe Chairman Lewis alluded to earlier, some other industries to do the same thing and try to put forward policies that we can gain support in the legislature for.
I'd love to work with you on that. You have 4 suggestions here on how we can help the hotel industry. I have some other ones on manufacturing that would help them. Going forward, how much of an impact they have? The idea is that we want to keep business in Georgia, and we want to help them grow and expand. And by doing that, it's a win for the state as well. So tax credits to me are a win-win for all of us. It's not a lose. And it's such a small percentage. And you're right, $9.8 billion. We're only talking about less than $100 million a year in tax credits. That's all we currently do. So there's a lot of room for improvement and a lot of ways that we can help small to medium-sized business. The large corporations, they generally do fine. But what's the difference in if they get $5 or $6 million in tax credits? But $10,000 or $20,000 to a small business can mean the difference between keeping a job in Georgia and losing that job. And we can give you examples of companies that have utilized tax credits for growth and expansion here in the state of Georgia.
Do you have a follow-up?
No.
John?
No, sir.
Just one more quick question, because in an earlier conversation you alluded to it, and I think it'd be profitable for us to hear it as a group. A lot of these credits that you're talking about are generally weighted against income that a business produces. There has been talk about the possibility of eliminating the corporate income tax, which perception-wise, that may take care of a lot of these tax credits, a lot of folks think. But I know you have an opinion on that, and would you just expound on the impact that it would have on business if the corporate income tax was eliminated?
Well, certainly it would impact business. However, all organizations that take advantage of tax credits are not C Corps. And what you're talking about are C corporations. But when you take your S corporations, your LLCs, your limited liability partnerships, your sole proprietorships, those tax credits would certainly impact them. For instance, we work with a couple of dentists at church, and they have 6 people in their office. Well, it's not a big organization, but 2 years ago we got them $15,000 in tax credits, one of the dentists. Well, they used that to upgrade their equipment and add additional staff because of that. So it will impact C Corps, it won't impact all the other groups that are in business in the state of Georgia. And most of your small to medium-sized business are not C Corps. They're usually S Corps.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that presentation. Thank you for being here and doing that. Next, Joy Wallstrom, come up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everybody. It's always a pleasure to be here in Savannah, and I would like to acknowledge Marty Barrow from the Tourism Leadership Council. The Tourism Alliance was actually started here in Savannah at the recommendation of our now House Chairman on Economic Development and Tourism. And it was based on the model of what Marty and her team do with the Tourism Leadership Council, so I appreciate you being here this morning. We started the alliance in 2002 is based on the fact that there really wasn't anyone representing the tourism industry at the Capitol. And I think, in my personal opinion, that's one of the reasons that we have the challenges that Terry spoke so eloquently to, and I appreciate. He really is a phenomenal expert and resource for us and for the Hotel and Lodging Association, and willing to offer his services to you guys. So appreciate you being with us this morning. In 2002, after the governor was elected, one of the things that he did was create the Commission for New Georgia, which you guys are all very familiar with. And a big part of that was developing what those strategic industries of growth were for Georgia. And tourism actually was recognized as part of that. We are one of the 6 preferred industries in the state, and actually hotel companies do qualify as a tourism definition. But as Terry said, the development investment projects that are out there, tourism projects can't qualify. And we've done a good bit of research. Georgia Power has helped us a great bit, and I appreciate their support. And what we're looking at is the Kentucky model, which basically is a sales tax reimbursement. You can recoup 25% of your development costs over 10 years based on your sales tax. And kind of to Chuck's point, you'd have to be profitable. You'd have to have gotten your financing on the front side, so it'd have to be a valid, qualified project. And I think that would be an excellent thing to look at, and I've got a lot of research for you guys on that. But I'm going to actually ask the folks that are really doing it in the industry to get up and speak and talk to what their experience is. And I would like to recognize my chairman, Barry White from Augusta, to get us started.
Thank you, Joy. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, for allowing us to present today. Just want to talk a little bit about what tourism product is. And it can be many different things. I'll give you just a couple of examples. One, it can be distinct natural resources. It can be beaches, mountains, lakes. And those of us who are blessed to have those resources are certainly fortunate. But where an incentive might help could be the expansion or improving the sustainability of those products. It could also be history or heritage, including architecture, recreation or entertainment facilities, attractions, and it can also be convention, conference centers, and, of course, hotels. And I want to spend just a couple minutes and talk about hotels and conference centers. It's a very lucrative business. It's lucrative for the city. It's lucrative for the state to have these visitors coming in for meetings and conventions. And those projects, conference centers and hotels, are typically public-private partnerships. The public typically builds a conference center, pays for that because it's a good investment and they get a good return on it. The private sector that would then build the hotel. Some examples of what's going on, and I'll give you a couple of out-of-state examples and a couple of in-state examples. But typically a 200-room hotel, full service, and that's a hotel like this as opposed to a Hampton Inn or a Hilton Garden Inn. Full-service hotel, 200 rooms, would probably cost about $30 million to build. In Columbia, South Carolina, they have built a conference center. The city invested in a conference center. They need a hotel attached. Hotels and conference centers must be attached to be successful. They are looking for a hotel. They are right now offering $3 million to a hotel developer to come in and build attached to their conference center. And to date, they have not been successful. In Raleigh, North Carolina, they are building a $210 million conference center, and the city was, in addition to that, they were required to contribute $20 million to get a 400-room Marriott built there. That's an enticement that has to be offered. Macon, I know, is trying to get a hotel attached to the Centerplex there, and in Augusta right now, we have $25 million in SPLOST funds that have been approved and are sitting in the bank. We're working on a project with the Georgia Golf Hall of Fame as the preferred location, and we want to get a hotel developer to come in and build a full-service hotel attached to that $25 million center. So we're providing $25 million, probably some land contribution, but we need to continue with those incentives, and I think the cities are participating, so it's important for the state to participate at this level too. That way we can get the return on the dollar. So again, you're going to hear from some different partners on behalf of the Tourism Alliance this afternoon and later this morning. You're going to hear actually from the business owners who are developing tourism products in Georgia. And if there are no questions, I appreciate
Any
the
questions?
opportunity.
You have a question? John?
If I could, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Mr. White, if you could. What I think I'm hearing there is we're leading up to, and perhaps I'm getting ahead, is a situation where a local government, be a county, city, or a CVB, is determined to tax themselves or make use of the hotel motel tax by enacting local legislation and using the Georgia statute to make the local investment. What I suspect we're going to hear in the next piece here, if I'm correct, is you have private people involved in it, in building that. You have the local government that are dedicating part of their hotel motel tax per the Georgia statute. And what we're going to hear here is next. My question is how the state might be able to help with using the model from Kentucky. Is that
Right.
to sort of finish the third leg on the
You're
stool?
exactly right, and I think Bruce Green from the department is going to go over that in his presentation, who I believe is next.
If I may, before you sit down, you mentioned a subject that sparked my interest early on when you mentioned tourism as it relates to our natural resources. You mentioned beaches and mountains and lakes and so forth, which I'm glad you did because that just rung a bell with me. I want to mention something that could be a little hotly or controversial, but around the state, on some of our state parks, like Red Top Mountain, for example, in my district, we have a very nice lodge up there that is state-run, or state-operated, and I think there's 5 or 6 similar facilities around the state that are like that. Now, at one time, we tried to privatize those facilities, but for various reasons it did not work out, so the state resumed operation or took back control operation. I guess the first part of my question is your association, how have you had the chance to consider or look at the impact that a state-operated facility may have when you're competing against your privately owned facilities, especially if they're on a natural resource such as a lake, like that? And if that's too much for now, just think about it.
I'm going to look at Joy and see if there's
okay.
anything that she knows, and I'll make one comment initially.
State competing
Right.
with the government?
I will just say real quickly, in my opinion, in my experience in the Augusta area is, I don't know that there's not a lot of competition between the two because the state parks offer a different type of product and a different type of experience for the visitor. So sometimes there's that natural separation or differentiation between the two, between a conference center type hotel or hotels along the interstate and the experience you would get at a park. But
one other thing I would just say is that some of the privatization projects actually have been successful.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what we've got to figure out in this investment piece as part of it. Brasstown was successful.
Mm-hmm.
And Dick Stormont was actually the developer on that project, and he has since sold his company to Noble Investment, which is doing a lot of the tourism projects here in Georgia, Callaway Gardens' new facility, as well as the new W that you've heard about that was the Sheridan Colony Square property. Dick will tell you he never would have invested his own money to build Brasstown because that was a vastly undeveloped part of our state. So that project never would have happened if we hadn't, the state, gone in and supported it. And what happened as a result is significant investment by the private sector all around it to grow that economy. And Brasstown's completely privatized, and actually we, the state, make money, quote unquote, off Brasstown and offset any capital construction projects that we had. But I think for some of our projects like Red Top, the kinds of things that are in the Kentucky model could really reinforce and help us find the right person to take that project to the next level.
Okay. Thanks for that. And kind of a second part to the question, when it comes back to hotel and resorts on our natural resources, Red Top, for example, is a Corps of Engineer lake, and dealing with the Corps can be quite discouraging. So have there been any history of any tourism association trying to deal with the Corps to establish something on any Corps property, and if so, what was that experience, and what might your association be doing to try to open up a dialogue, if you will, with the Corps on some of their facilities?
Bruce Green could speak to Lincolnton a little bit when it's his turn.
Okay.
But I will tell you, with the Lake Lanier project, which is really getting ramped up. That's another example of KSL, the first privatization person, wasn't the best operator choice, and they're completely revisiting what the relationship is between the Lake Lanier Islands Authority, the state's role in that, and the new private sector developer. And I can get Bob Newsom to get you some more information. He works for the Department of Natural Resources on what that process is. They also are having their challenges with the Corps, but I think they've made more progress than we've seen on a similar project in a long time. And then Bruce can speak to a project that hasn't happened yet in Lincolnton when it's his turn.
Okay.
That's
Anyone else? Thank you for that. Just appreciate that. Next is Bruce Green to talk about the Kentucky model and perhaps a few other areas. Bruce, please come on up.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Well, good morning. I'm Bruce Green. I'm the Tourism Product Development Manager with the Department of Economic Development. And I'm just going to speak briefly on the experience we have departmentally on a day-to-day basis in trying to develop tourism product across our state. One of the things I'd like to share with you is I come from a background of community development and historic preservation and local government. So with that background, what I see day to day is to solve many of the problems, both technical assistance and finance problems that we have in developing tourism product. It takes people with that kind of depth of experience, or it takes many departments working together. Historically, in our department, we do not have bricks and mortar money. And I can't tell you how many times in the last few weeks that's how we open almost every conversation. We don't have bricks and mortar money, but we have marketing money. So as product development manager, the task that I have, as I say, day to day, is to pull upon every resource that I can possibly find. Some of that, as you see in your presentation or your folder. What I tried to do is put together a list of incentives and resources that we typically use or reference our clients to when they come to us with a project. Then I included, which is an interesting place that communities don't always think to go, the tools that we have from a statutory standpoint and from a constitutional standpoint on utilizing the local tax base. So really we look at two sources of financing, that which comes from the local tax base and then those that would come from either the state or maybe even in some cases the federal level. Terry spoke about the tax credits, and I want to take a moment to address that. As he mentioned, there are 30 some odd tax credits, and I don't deal with the manufacturing ones, but I can tell you that historically in Georgia, since about the 1960s when we started creating industrial development authorities, most of our statutory language dealt with manufacturing. But in those last 40 years, and primarily in the last 5, what we have seen is through the work of the Tourism Alliance, we have seen the language in our statutes be tweaked to include tourism. If you look at the standard BEST legislation, or that which creates job tax credits in general, based upon the tier of the community, and therefore you get a subsequent dollar value per job, per full-time job that's created, what you have to do is go into the Department of Community Affairs rules that were established where tourism, as Joy mentioned, the specific industries that are defined, and tourism itself is defined, and it's very specifically defined. And departmentally, over the last several months, that's what we've been looking at to make sure that as it was defined during the Miller administration, that it's still applicable. And I'm going to talk just a second about the Kentucky model in a moment, because that's one of the issues they've faced, is the redefining of what tourism is to the state of Kentucky. But in this, one of our big resources that we can pull upon outside of a direct appropriation from the General Assembly is One Georgia. Nancy Cobb, as the executive director, travels with us on many different projects and places. In fact, she'll be with me next week on a big event that we're doing down in southwest Georgia. And Nancy and the board of One Georgia looks favorable at tourism projects. But even then, as we know, there are certain criteria that have to be in place, and it's the job creativity and the investment that triggers that. If you look at front door money, clearly One Georgia and then some of the smaller granting programs that come across to anyone who is eligible from Department of Community Affairs or from the Department of Natural Resources, On a day-to-day basis, we can typically relay our client to our friends at those agencies. But one of the things that we try to use, too, is the job tax credits that were created within the last 2 years under something called the Opportunity Zone. The Opportunity Zone is a particular area, if you will, that is defined by a minimum of basically 4 to 5 criteria. And without getting into too much of the complexity, but one of the prerequisites for the use of this kind of high-end job tax credit area is poverty. Well, I don't have to tell you too much to use the word poverty and tourism at the same time seems like to be opposing concepts. But in Georgia, we have found that in some very narrow, specific sites, if you will, there are cases where the Opportunity Zone can be used. And here's a case in point. Let's say in downtown Milledgeville, Georgia, they're looking at building a hotel and a small conference facility. If you go to the Department of Community Affairs poverty website that's relevant to the Opportunity Zone job tax credits, you can literally pinpoint the crosshairs in downtown Milledgeville, and it'll show you every census block group that meets that poverty criteria. Well, in this case, the poverty criteria go right down to the river, and it's the riverbank where they're potentially looking at this hotel or conference facility. And I'm going to spend just a minute talking about this because I want you to see the complex legislation or statutes that we have to use just to figure out where we call the backdoor incentives, where they are and where they may lie. And we heard the numbers that Terry mentioned about the average hotel and that Barry talked about how many employees. Let's see if we're talking about 100 employees in a hotel, maybe in Milledgeville. So if they met this Opportunity Zone requirement, and bear in mind that statutorily, not only do they have to petition the Department of Community Affairs, and I'm looking at our friend over there, Jim Finch, the local community has to have created an enterprise zone, which has its own criteria, and they have to have created an urban redevelopment area. All of those tools are given to them through our standard statutes in various parts of OCGA. So if they do that, the great return is that for those 100 jobs, and if that entity working through its local development authority, if that authority is a member of a joint authority, they are eligible for $4,000 per job, $4,000 job tax credit. So you see in that case, there is a very narrowly defined point, if you will, where job tax credits are applicable to a hotel project. But it is, I can just tell you, it's very narrowly defined. We were called by Dalton the other day, and you all know the Trade and Convention Center where it sits just to the left of I-75. Well, we ran the same statistical analysis and found out that if you look at the map, the census block groups are all indicative on the right side of I-75, and on the left side where the Trade Center is, the poverty criteria is not there. So these job tax credits, based upon the narrowly defined statutory rules that we go by, you can't use those. And then you know Whitfield County well enough to know that it's a high-ranking tier county. So if you go back to the typical best legislation job tax credits, which are, again, narrowly defined and specifically and well-intentioned narrowly defined within the definitions prepared in the rules of DCA, lodging is eligible. But, again, the tier is so high that the credit is much lower. So we have this kind of balancing act that we do between geospecific sites that meet these complex set of criteria and just typical economic stability of a community. And Terry, you said it very well that some of our job tax credits, once you can figure out how to use them, they're great, but they're quite complex and quite geospecific to where they can be used in Georgia. They are certainly not brushstroke tools that we can use. But anyway, I've prepared for you, and at your leisure if you want to look through there. And one of the things that we really encourage people to do is look at the creation of local tax allocation districts, because this is a matter of local home rule. And one of the hot tools that we see in the Atlanta area is the tax allocation districts. In other states, they call them tax increment financing districts. One off the top of my head is the Atlantic Station project, just to the left of 75 in Midtown. The attorney firm that worked with them, they travel with us on one of our programs that we do with the Department of Community Affairs on BIDs, SIDs, and TADs, and those are acronyms for Business Improvement Districts, Community Improvement Districts, and Tax Allocation Districts. And they are incrementally, as said, ranking in their complexity of use from just a simple petition to mayor and council to a full citywide referendum that has to be had to generate a tax allocation district. And again, those are just tools that a local government can access, tapping into their own tax equity and the increase in that tax equity over a period of time to fund infrastructure. If you look at that parking deck in the facility at Atlantic Station, all of that infrastructure was funded and is being funded through a tax allocation district. That tool comes to us under the statutory code of the Redevelopment Powers Act, and our Constitution says, because when the constitutional amendment was adopted, that we have to have a local referendum in order to engage that tool. So again, we see that tools that are out there aren't necessarily just easy to use. They come with a degree of complexity. Now, if I can take just a moment, and I'm just really prepared to kind of answer a few questions about the Kentucky model, and I'm by no means the expert. I did talk this week with Todd Cassidy, who is the director for the Cabinet of Commerce for Kentucky. He administers this program. The program was initiated in 1996, and he said since then they have amended it every single year since it was created. And I asked him why so many amendments, and he said it was the redefining of what a project might be and the criteria that it would need to be eligible. But as Joy said, in a bottom line, it's a sales tax reimbursement to an investor or development corporation over a period of 10 years, and typically up to 25% of that investment. He did tell me that there have been some projects that, following the pro forma and following the build-out of the project, that the state of Kentucky decided not to give the full 25%, that they chose to give, say, 12% or maybe even 18%. And I will share with you all this. He made it very clear that these projects are highly scrutinized. There are three departments, our state's equivalent of the Department of Economic Development, the Department of Revenue, and the Department of Community Affairs. All three departments must absolutely agree that this particular project, the applicant, is eligible. So the developmental corporation goes through a great deal of scrutiny, and the state of Kentucky requires the applicant, the development corporation, the investor, to have to engage a consultant, and the consultant runs the pro forma analysis for the state. And if it doesn't wash out, so to speak, the state doesn't offer that incentive. And he did tell me that even though they typically do these very intensive studies, once in a while, just in the market, you'll get a project that doesn't meet its projected revenue stream. And that was another thing. After the fourth year, the investment has to prove that they will show or are showing a net new revenue stream back to the state. And then typically, if you'll think in mind of state sales tax, it is the state's portion of the sales tax that's coming back. That's why you don't have to have a referendum locally, because it doesn't engage or involve the local sales tax. It's only the state sales tax. But they've created a formula, and when you first read through it, you don't spot it. But if you talk to them, you realize this thing is basically revenue neutral. They're just basically reimbursing back because that corporate investment, that job creativity, they have to absolutely verify and justify that they can create a revenue stream that flows back to the state that demands it. So it's an interesting tool and an interesting model, and we certainly need to talk with them more and learn more about it. But on a day-to-day basis, if we had something like that model, it certainly would perhaps be a little easier. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily easier for the applicant, but it would be easier for the state. And so in summary, I would share with you, tourism product development is very complex. We work with the for-profit private sector, we work with the nonprofit, and we work with the local governments. And on any given project, we may be working with all three of them. So we have to use our state's toolbox that we have that comes to us, again, from the statutes and from the Constitution. And it's not always easy to do, but it's challenging, and I'll be glad to answer any questions that you'll have. Yes, sir.
Thank
you. Oh, I thought you...
No, go ahead.
Bruce, if I understand this correctly, and this is a general analogy, I guess, but it sounds like the Kentucky model relative to sales tax is a lot like the way the tax allocation district works in Georgia with local governments and ad valorem tax. Is what you're telling me, if a new project comes in County X and they build that county, the incremental sales tax that they bring into the state would be used to pay for up to, I think, Kentucky 25%, in Georgia it could be more or less, whatever we do. That is, if you will, found revenue for the time. We wouldn't have gotten that had they not built the project, so we'll put some of that back into the project for a given time, and then we keep it afterwards, which is very much like what's tax allocation
Absolutely.
district. But it's state funds, it's not local. They could also be building that project within a tax allocation district should the county, city, if there is one involved, and school board agree. So if we were to implement a model similar to this, you could have the, Kentucky model implemented in Georgia. You could also have that in a tax allocation district, and it would basically be up to the state on this project or the local governments to see the future of the project as being a long-term good to go forward.
That's right.
Am I grasping?
You
am I
are
making that
correct.
analogy?
And again, I'm not the expert on it, but I do have a background in it. But I will share something that you, in your comments, you discovered is, and I don't know if you all picked up, that typically in a tax allocation district, the tax equity money that builds up and it's put into what we call a sinking fund and set aside, and it cannot be used for anything else but to pay off the bonded indebtedness that's issued at the onset of the project. And that's one thing we need to understand. This is money up front. Typically, it's used for infrastructure, for public facilities. In other words, water lines, sewer lines, streets, curbs, gutters. And again, if you look at that parking deck at Atlantic Station, it's the largest parking deck east of the Mississippi, I believe. But so the tax allocation district in Georgia is used for infrastructure, but the Kentucky model is used for the private development. You see the difference? And if you combine those two, that would be the ideal situation because you're building infrastructure with this tool and you're building the private development, or at least incentivizing the private development with the Kentucky model. I asked Todd if they had a name for it. He said, we call it the Kentucky model. Any other?
Anything else? Just now, I heard you mention that in the Kentucky model, when they reimburse the sales tax, it's only the state portion.
That's what I understand.
Not
Right.
the local portion. Does Kentucky? I know it seems like Georgia, we have a special hotel motel tax. In a lot of places where I pay my hotel motel bill, I see that special tax. Does Kentucky have such a tax that's separate from the state sales and the local sales? And if so, does that 25% reimbursement, is it weighted against that at all?
He did not mention that.
Okay.
They may very well have that, but in his dialogue with me, he mentioned sales tax in particular. He did not mention a lodging or a bed tax as a part of that, but I can verify that and let you know. So.
It's state sales tax only. Their
Right.
hotel tax
Right.
is totally separate. And in Georgia, I think revenue would definitely have an issue if we tried to get them to start collecting it, because currently in Georgia, hotel tax stays local.
Yeah, that's, I thought that was the case, but I wanted to make sure. Let me ask this, and this may not pertain to the Kentucky model. It just may be a general question in general. But when it comes to, Let me go back a minute. In the Kentucky model, does this 25% reimbursement apply only to lodging facilities, or is that any defined tourism facility, such as an attraction or a park or?
It's quite a lengthy list of facilities, and that's why that Todd was telling me that they had tweaked their legislation. As they've had fairly significant projects come before them, they've had to adjust it to redefine it.
Okay.
But it involves everything from theme restaurants, lodging, entertainment destination centers, even craft and product centers, so a variety of different things.
Theme restaurants?
Yep. And they have a very particular pro forma they run on that theme restaurant. He was telling me about it. So
Like a Hard Rock Cafe?
Yep. Mm-hmm. And it has to generate, and it's that in that fourth year, that thing has to be generating a certain line of revenue, or it doesn't get the incentive. As I say, they've really worked at this. They've spent 10 years kind of tweaking the tool.
Also, on the subject of taxes with tourism properties, what about, and then this applies more to local communities, but the property taxes and the ad valorem property taxes, has there been any conversation about the impact that has on a lot of some of our lodging facilities or other attraction-related facilities?
Not in the last 2 or 3 years. I've not heard that as a question, but I will share you. Our State Enterprise Zone Act that was adopted in '97 and subsequently amended a couple of times, it allows for a local property tax abatement. Again, there's a set of criteria: poverty, unemployment, general distress, less development, and then urban blight can be the main criteria that you use, and the community decides to do this. But you can abate an investment. Here's the threshold for the investment. 5 or more jobs must be created, or you must improve the building or the improvement on the land 5 times greater than the value of the land. So that is a tool that we currently have in Georgia, and local communities, local governments can invoke that if the criteria happen to be there. And there are a number of communities around Georgia that have done it, but we haven't seen it used exactly yet for tourism. But if you had a hotel or a conference facility, and Barry was talking about typically the conference facility has a lot of public money in it, but the hotel, you certainly could look at an enterprise zone. In fact, in Milledgeville, that's exactly what we're looking at. The urban redevelopment area, the enterprise zone, and the opportunity zone, because if you layer all 3 of those, that's where the greatest number of incentives. But it's that poverty criteria that has to be there. And again, I look out at this group that represents tourism, and those 2 words don't always go together.
I asked that question because in my home county, I recently received my property tax bill, and it's going the direction that most everything else is, up and up and up. And just want to know if you've heard from any of the businesses out there that offer tourism services to see if that's been an issue or a complaint. In this handout you've given us, you have the Georgia Green Space Program, and I haven't read it. I've just noticed the headline there. Is there anything going on to partner up tourism with Georgia's Green Space Program, like actually own properties that have been designated green space, or is that coming up later?
Well, there are some projects. In fact, it's interesting. I leave here today and go to Fort Gaines, to George T. Bagby, and there's a huge conference called the Riverway South. It's Alabama, Georgia, and Florida getting together all the counties that front the Chattahoochee, the Flint, and the Apalachicola River. And we're going to be talking about these incentives there tomorrow, in fact, tomorrow morning at 9:30. And what we are finding is the nature-based groups are the ones that are really pushing for this set-aside of this green space. And even in rural communities, you're seeing rural communities take part in this set-aside because it's the parks and green space that create the fabric or the envelope, if you will, in which tourism projects can be built in or nestled in. And it's the total of the package that really makes a small community or even a large community that more. We say that which makes a community livable also makes it visitable.
Okay. And piggybacking on that, is there any relationship or partnership when there's what I think is called an infield or a brownfield development inside an urban area when it's strictly a tourism related project? I think there are certain incentives for projects that may not be just redevelopment projects in general, but is there anything in particular for tourism when something like that occurs?
Well, again, that would be us partnering with the Department of Community Affairs. I can't think of a brownfield off the top of my head, but it's not to say it's not being discussed. I will share with you, we have just gotten a call from Newton County, Covington, and we're teaming up, kind of a Team Georgia approach to go in to look at a hotel conference center development that happens to be going or looking at their downtown, but it's on the edge of a distressed neighborhood. So some of these tools could certainly be used. But if you look at some of our, in fact, if you look at almost every Main Street city, these are cities of 50,000 down to 5,000 in Georgia, you can find brownfield property within 6 blocks of the courthouse. And to me, I'm glad you brought that up, because I will tell you that is a challenge to us. If you look at as Georgians, we really ought to be utilizing this Main Street space close to these downtowns because, one, the infrastructure is there. Typically in these Main Street cities, the Department of Community Affairs works with, and we work with also. That's where you're seeing the boutique hotels. Madison is an example. They have a new boutique hotel that's being built in Madison. We've not been involved directly, but the city created a green space. The city tore down an old warehouse that was non-historic, non-architecturally significant, and they have a multi-million-dollar boutique hotel and about a $6 million mixed-use private development going across from it. So there's a little microcosm, if you will, of what green space can do, and the city took the lead on the green space.
That's good, because I asked that because in Cartersville, I think we have a great example of that with our Booth Western Art Museum. It was built over in a church and the old jailhouse, and I'm sure they probably took advantage of all they could during that time. But
yeah, and Seth and I have been talking a little bit also.
I'm good. Anything else? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Appreciate that. We're making good time. Next, Mark Smith.
We're a little ahead of schedule. You might not-
Is he not here yet?
we can see it.
Okay. Well, we will. We're a little ahead of schedule, so if we.
This is the Kentucky model.
Okay. So,
On the side is kind of.
so what we'll do, since we're a little ahead of schedule, we'll take about a 5-minute break. I know Representative Martin indicated he could use one. I think I could too. So we'll take about a 5-minute break and come back in here in about 5 minutes or so. Came back in time for the break.
I can't get in here within 5 minutes. The next speaker is here, Doug Lambert, who's
Yeah,
also a
okay.
hotel developer.
Hey, let me ask you this. If I notice we're scheduled to break for lunch at 12:15, but if time's on our side here, do you want to move some of these folks up?
Kent and Dan are flying. so
Okay.
They can't get here for, they could go a little early. If we move Doug before lunch.
Okay, that's okay to do
Yeah,
him
because
for lunch? Okay.
Dan and Kent fly in to signature at
Okay.
1 o'clock.
All right.
So they can probably be here by 1:30 by the time we get back for lunch. So that would
Okay.
certainly bump up those two last ones. I'll try and reach Mike back or Mike and Ken before lunch too.
All right, if they're here, that's fine. I mean, okay. Just, yeah, but if, we'll give Mark a little time. If he's not here, we'll go ahead with Duck and do Mark when he gets here. Right.
Brandon and I made a reservation at Soho, which is like a block from here.
Oh, for lunch? Great. Good. Thank you. Gary's presentation.
One.
If we could get everybody back to their places, we'll try to get started here. How you doing? You doing all right?
Testing. Testing. Yeah. Testing. Testing. Testing.
All right. Let's go ahead and get started so we can, we may have time to hear from two more before we break for lunch. And next up on our list is Mark Smith. Mark, if you wouldn't mind taking the podium and just making your comments, and we'll, if you wouldn't mind sticking around for questions if there possibly are any. But
thank you, Mr.
Go
Chairman.
right ahead. Thank you for being here.
Welcome everybody to Chatham County, and appreciate y'all coming down and addressing this important subject. I'm a hotel developer, and this is great to be a hotel developer in Chatham County in this day and age. In 1993, we had about 8,000 rooms in Chatham County. Today, we have about 12,000 rooms. And those rooms are creating a lot of jobs, and they're creating a lot of taxes for the state of Georgia, and they're creating a lot of positive economic development and positive influence on our community. In the last 24 months, we've opened 1,000 hotel rooms in Chatham County. And in the next 24 months, we probably have right now about 1,000 rooms either under construction or under development or in the pipeline in one of the various approval processes. And it's good. And there's some great stories of what happens with people, some great economic development stories, some great individual stories. We have our manager at the Mulberry Inn started as a front desk clerk. And she's an African-American female, so worked her way from front desk clerk to general manager of the hotel. So I think a lot of people have this perception that there aren't good jobs in the hospitality industry, that they're all entry-level positions. And yes, there are a lot of entry-level positions, but there are a lot of great management jobs too that paying very nice salaries. We have the Mulberry Inn on Bay Street, and then, a couple blocks down the street we built the Hampton Inn 10 years ago. And now we have under construction our Holiday Inn Express. And I thought I'd talk a little bit about this project in light of economic development incentives. This project was approved in 2001, and as we all know, there was a tragic event in that year, and it caused us to retrench and rethink what we were doing here. And we went ahead and got some pricing on it in 2002. And we were still wrestling with whether to move ahead with it. We decided to move ahead this summer, but in the meantime, the construction costs had gone from about $11 million, just the raw construction costs with the general contractor, from $11 million to $15 million. So we've paid a serious financial penalty in waiting. In the meantime, other operating costs have increased dramatically too, labor, utilities. You just go right down the list, everything from insurance on down. So I don't know what to advise you to do, but if there are some things, I've heard tax credits mentioned. I don't know what the state can do, but this property will generate probably at least $200,000 a year just in sales tax revenue for the state. So there's an immediate payback in whatever the state could do. In any kind of a tax abatement or things of that nature. The other thing I wanted to mention today was I know there's been some discussion about the hotel-motel tax and maybe restricting or reminding everybody what the different components of that tax are. I've looked back at the legislation. The first hotel tax was adopted in 1978, is my recollection, and it was a 3% tax. And it wasn't specified what it was to go for. I think the intent was for marketing, but almost immediately all the municipal governments took the money, and it was not applied toward or reinvested in marketing the destination. And so later the General Assembly came back and imposed another 2% tax, which was at that point specified that it had to go for marketing and had to go to a 501c3 organization whose intent was to market. And I would just encourage the legislature to remember that and to enforce that, because it is the reinvestment that brings people here. It's the reinvestment of those tax dollars that's allowed this tremendous growth in the tourism industry and the hotel business here in Chatham County. And we've not begun to tap the potential that is here. We are doing very little out on I-95. We hope to do more, and there are several initiatives that are in place through the state and local agencies, but through the welcome centers, and I'm working with Dan Rowe and some of those guys, and we're going to be working on developing a strategy to capture those 12 million vehicles a year that travel that 112 miles on I-95 as they come along the coast. But if we take our dollars and invest and try to convince those people to stay in Georgia, I think it'll pay immediate and dramatic benefits. That's about all I have to say, but I'll be happy to try to answer any questions.
Question? Just one question on your project right there. Did I hear you say that's also going to have convention facilities in there?
Well, it will have meeting facilities, yes.
Eating facilities?
Meeting
okay.
facilities. Right.
Okay. And do you anticipate what that would accommodate? If what kind of crowds?
Well, we'll be able to. It's a very small footprint of a building. It's a Holiday Inn Express, so by definition, it doesn't really have a lot of meeting space. But it will have about 2,000 square feet, so we'll be able to accommodate a couple of hundred people at a time at one function.
Now, I think I know where this development's located here, but is this considered an infield or brownfield development? In other words, was it over something that was existing prior to this?
No,
okay.
No. This is on Bay Street at Abercorn.
Okay.
There are some brownfield opportunities down in Trustee's Garden, which I'm actually going to another meeting on today. That they're trying to figure. The owner of that property is trying to figure out what to do with it.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you. Appreciate you presenting. Since we're a bit ahead of schedule, I'm going to move one item that we have scheduled for after lunch to now, if that's okay and they're ready. And that is Doug Lambert, President of Southeastern Hospitality Services. Doug? Thank you. You walked by the window and I only saw a shadow go by. But if you wouldn't mind going ahead and giving us a presentation, and we appreciate you willing to do it a little ahead of schedule.
Thank you. Thank you for asking me here today. I appreciate the opportunity. Just want to talk with you briefly about hotel development, similar to Mark on a much smaller scale. But I'd like for you to imagine for a second that a national developer called the Georgia Department of Industry, Trade, and Tourism, now the Georgia Department of Economic Development, and told them that the project managers, they were looking into building a plant in the state of Georgia that would cost about $80 million. Would employ 378 workers. The facility would not only include jobs for highly paid, skilled employees, but would also have a number of positions for entry-level employees that have previously been unemployed. The project would generate annual taxable sales of $30 million, pay sales taxes in excess of $1.7 million per year, ground rent to the state of $1.5 million per year, and property taxes in excess of $1.3 million on the improvements. And on top of that, eventually the state would get all the improvements back and then belong to the state again. I dare say the project managers would dispatch a Southern Company jet to pick them up. They'd bring them to Atlanta, put them in a black Ford, take them to dinner, and give them a nice tour of the state of Georgia to look for sites. But that's exactly what's happening collectively all over the state as entrepreneurs build small to medium-sized hotels. These hotels, often in smaller towns, have a direct influence on tourism and tourism product development. Yet most are built without any government assistance or even encouragement. These developers often stake their entire financial security to build a quality lodging in underdeveloped sites desperate for tourism and tourism product. The example I just mentioned is the Savannah Hilton Head International Airport. In 1998, there were no accommodations at the airport. You recall that the airport built a new terminal and an exit on 995, and in 1998, there were no accommodations on that corner. I was fortunate enough to open the first hotel there in August of 1999 with a group of investors. And today, all the available land is leased by the Airport Commission, which is owned by the City of Savannah. In 2 years, when all the construction is complete, there'll be a total of 1,142 guest rooms costing almost $80 million at that site. They'll service West Chatham County. That's big business by any standard, or as we say in South Georgia, big business. Fortunately, West Chatham County, as Mark had mentioned, is experiencing phenomenal growth. Many communities are not so fortunate but need good quality lodging to facilitate growth and encourage tourism. The fact that most of these sites will be developed by small hotel operators should not dampen the state and local government's enthusiasm to encourage these projects. Just as Savannah Airport grew from one hotel with 80 rooms to a major interstate commercial destination, so can many sites and many more communities with the proper encouragement. So I urge you to put the incentives in place to encourage this type of development around the state.
All right. Good. Any question? Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate you being here. Well, that gets us up to our lunch break. Any quick comments before we break? We will come back here around 1:30, 2 o'clock. Our next presentation will begin at 2 o'clock, and I understand they're arriving about that time also. So
Actually, they can probably start by 1:30.
Okay, 1:30. All right. Well, let's.
James the driver.
Okay. All righty. Well, thank you all for being here this morning. Let's go ahead and take a lunch break, and we'll start back up at 1:30 this afternoon. Off for the afternoon session. Trust everyone had a good lunch. To start with, our next presenter, speaker, is Kent Busher, CEO with Wild Adventures and Cypress Gardens. And Kent, if you wouldn't mind, come on up to the podium there, and you can just go ahead and start presenting to us. Thank you for being here, by the way. We appreciate it.
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you to allow me the opportunity to come and speak. I started, and I'll give you just a little very simple background of how I started Wild Adventures. It actually started as a joke, and many people that know my story know that. Back in 1981, I got married to my wife, and over the next 10 years we built a printing business. We both developed and had a love for animals, and we didn't have any kids yet, so somewhere around the end of the 80s she makes this comment to me one day, I sure would like to have a horse. And so in Christmas of 1990 I had the big idea to go buy a horse. Well, first thing I do if you got a horse, you have to have a place to keep it. We lived in the middle of the city limits of Valdosta. They weren't permitted. So I bought this 100-acre farm on the outskirts of Valdosta and proceeded to develop this great little gentleman farm. I had this grand idea that maybe we would build a house out there. And as we proceeded along, our employees in our printing company thought one day, as a joke, I became the young farmer, and they thought, well, anybody with a farm will have some farm animals. So our employees at our printing company for my birthday bought me a series of, when I say nasty farm animals, they were pretty nasty. I had this nasty old billy goat. He was old. That got delivered to my office along with a baby calf and chickens and an assortment of things as a big joke. Well, what happened in our case is that I started having friends started calling me and said, hey, listen, here you've got some of this stuff. My kids have never seen this or that, or can they come out and ride the horses or whatever? And it just hit me one day there wasn't a place in South Georgia where kids, and my friends could afford to take the kids anywhere, could have the opportunity to go and see animals. And so as a courtesy to schools and a desire to fill a community service, I started running free school field trips in the early 90s. Well, one thing led to another, And we got to spend it, and I kept adding things out at our farm. I built a big picnic shelter, and then so the kids would have a place to eat when they came out and got off the bus, and then I had to build bathrooms, and I built a playground, and pretty soon it just kept going on and on. Then it took people to care for it. And so I looked up one day, and we were spending $500,000+ a year being a nice guy to entertain kids for free. And my CPA said this just isn't going to fly. We're going to find some way to pay for this, or you're going to have a huge tax problem one day. So I was at a junction trying to decide, do I go forward or do I quit? And a lot of people in the community said, no, you ought to go forward. So the precursor to Wild Adventures ultimately was born in 1996 as really a petting zoo and an animal park. After I got it, then I found out I was having to work all kinds of crazy hours, so I had to figure out a way to pay for it. So I decided to look at some alternatives and started meeting with some of our guests who said, why don't you have rides? And so we booked in a carnival late in the year, booked some concerts and other events, and tried to find out what would bring people to a place in rural South Georgia in the middle of a farm. And we found that some combination very quickly of rides and animals and shows and events would do it. So and I had to make another decision. Do I really want to get in this and now go borrow real money and get into the theme park business, or do I just want to quit, take the easy way out? Well, I elected to do it the hard way. And so in 1997, in March of 97, we changed the name to Wild Adventures and opened with a big assortment of 8 rides, mostly kids' rides, and began to really approach the business in a way that we would just just bootstrap your way up. It was kind of like climbing up a mountain, side of a mountain. You climb a little bit, knock some rocks off, and you climb a little further. And that's the way that we built Wild Adventures. Well, over a period of several years, by listening to our guests and just pure hard work and constant investment of money, Wild Adventures became a successful operation that was drawing somewhere north of 1,200,000 guests to come to the park. We were making money, we were doing well. And in 2003, while we were growing and expanding Florida Cypress Gardens, which was Florida's original theme park and the predominant pre-Disney place that people visited in the state of Florida, was suffering a decline in attendance. And Cypress Gardens closed unexpectedly in April of 2003. I had really decided I liked the theme park business and had looked at other opportunities to develop another park or buy an existing park, and had looked at a couple of them. They just didn't seem to fit right. Well, in this particular case, as I contacted the former owners without success of Cypress Gardens, a friend of mine is a writer for the amusement industry, came up one day just a couple of days afterwards and said, hey, I've heard that, what do you about Cypress Gardens closing? I said, well, it's tragic. He said, you ought to buy that thing. I said, well, if I could, I don't know what they want, number one. Number two, I can't even anybody call me back, so they must not be interested in selling. They must have some other plan. Well, he contacted a friend at the Orlando Sentinel who called me and says, is there really some truth that you may want to buy Cypress Gardens? Well, I didn't say that, but the answer to the question is, sure, I may be interested in buying it, and because that's the business I'm in, and I think it's got a good opportunity. I hadn't been there since I was a little kid, but I believe that, from what I know about it, that there's probably enough land and there's probably an opportunity to reinvent the park that make it work. Well, the next day they wrote this big story in the Orlando Sentinel on the front page that says, basically, crazy guy from Georgia wants to buy Cypress Gardens, something to that effect. And that prompted a call from the governor's office of the state of Florida to say, hey, are you really interested in this? Because if you are, we'd like to put you together with some state funding and an opportunity to to make this work. Well, the rest is history. At the end of the day, the state of Florida decided that Cypress was a worthwhile investment to the tune of, they put up $12 million to assist us in the purchase of Cypress Gardens. That was a grant. They bought a conservation easement to the property, which precluded it from being developed as a condo complex, which is what the property was slated for. Polk County invested an additional $2 million to the local county with some assistance of state funding to do that. And so as a result, we invested some $80 million, that and 3 hurricanes, invested $80 million into the redevelopment of Cypress Gardens and opened it in December of 2004. And both parks today draw over 1.25 million people a year and have done well in meeting our objectives. And I think it's, what I got asked to talk about was incentives and how that, what was the relationship between the two. In our case of developing Wild Adventures, the state, the county spent nothing. We bootstrap it, and I think part of the issue is, of course, as I was out setting about, there are no profits in his own land, so it's easy to cast about from another state to come in and somebody says, you're an expert, we ought to anoint you with something. And I don't know that the answer is direct grants, but I think there are opportunities, there are parallels between how we look at industry in other classes and how we look at tourism. I'm sure y'all probably been beat to death with the idea that tourism in Georgia is the #2 industry in the state. And, our #1 industry being agriculture, #3 manufacturing. And if we look at what we do for the #1 and #3 industries in this state versus what we do for the #2 industry, there are dramatic differences. I happened, until I sold it in 1999, our printing company, in order to invest in the theme park business, was the beneficiary of many state incentives and opportunities in manufacturing that do not, #3 industry, do not exist in tourism. First of all, when it's time to purchase equipment, if you're a manufacturer in the state of Georgia and you make a tangible product, we have the opportunity to exempt state sales tax on the purchase of equipment. And in most cases, if those products are sold around the country, while it does generate jobs, there's no current or future, or very little future sales tax generated as a result of production of those items. On the other hand, in the theme park business, if we go and decide I want to go buy a new $10 million roller coaster, I have to pay sales tax on that. Now, mind you, let me tell you what happens in the theme park business is the investment in those kind of assets draws additional people who come to the park. Every ticket that is purchased in the park is taxable, and both to the state and to the counties in the form of not only sales tax, but SPLOST taxes, and in Lowndes County we also have an e-SPLOST tax that helps fund a variety of projects. And additionally, when we look at manufacturing, while there's no question, every dollar invested in the state of Georgia, despite the industry, there is some spillover effect. Because if a manufacturer opens up shop and he employs 200 workers, well, those 200 workers have to have homes, and they buy in local stores and so on and so forth. But if we look at tourism and what it does, in Lowndes County, Wild Adventures generates over $200 million in economic activity in that community. And when you start talking about a little community like Valdosta, it's amazing what it does. In the last couple of years, there have been 12 new hotels built in Lowndes County. Each of those generates sales tax. Each of those generates property taxes. When we look at restaurants in Lowndes County, there's been a tremendous surge in retail and in restaurants that have gone on in the last several years. And if we looked at the growth in the county population, we've had a doubling and tripling of those kinds of services and things in our community. We looked at the population change. While it's been decent, that would not in any shape, fashion, or form support those kinds of growth in those areas. So when you go back and say, why do we have that growth? Why? And you can't get in a restaurant in Valdosta still on Friday and Saturday nights. Hotels are full throughout the year on weekends, and it's hard to get a room. You know, what is it that drove it? Well, and what drives it today? And the answer is Wild Adventures drives that. And if we think about how we could improve things in our state, in so many areas, when I look at what we do for manufacturing, and what do we do for agriculture, and what do we do for agriculture? If we look at how property is taxed between the various, the three types of classes in the top three industries that Georgians have the benefit of, you would find that only tourism gets the short shaft, so to speak. There are very little. You generate jobs in tourism, there are very little opportunities. Generate jobs in manufacturing, a lot of opportunities. We talked about sales tax. And then in order to finance a project, for us, one of our biggest costs is the cost of financing. You know, if I were still in the printing business and wanted to go out and finance the $80 million that I have invested in Valdosta at Wild Adventures, I could have financed that with a form of, you know, tax-exempt bonds that are available to that industry and would have driven the financing costs down, and everybody would love to underwrite that. There's a lot of people that like to underwrite those kind of loans. And with, you know, with a cost to the company of, on our debt level, about $4 million a year versus the $10 million that we pay. And the difference is just the availability and how those are, you know, what you could do. And we don't make that available. And that's something that should be looked at. The ability to issue those tax-exempt bonds and financing alternatives, if we believe that tourism is important. And if we look at, if we think that it is, and I think that it'd be hard to argue with the fact that tourism is not only important, but an absolutely critical place. It's a clean industry. Not a whole lot of pollution is generated. It generates a tremendous amount of spillover. People that come into our state come with money. And when they come and they stay in Lowndes County, they spend the night in the hotel, they eat in the restaurants, they buy gas, they shop in the malls, they go to the theater, they do all sorts of things as part of their visit. And yet, when I look at what we do to try to attract them, in any shape, fashion, form, encouraging the industry itself, we do virtually nothing. When I look at what do we spend, and I know I talked to Dan on the way over here, and you know I think he's pretty thankful that his marketing budget got boosted from $2.5 to $6 million. But it's a pittance. It's a pittance. You know, Georgia is number 8 in nationwide tourism, you know, in the country. And yet, I don't know where we fall, but we've got to be in the bottom tier somewhere of what we spend in order to attract it. Florida, number 1 industry and state is tourism. But Florida spends roughly 8 times what we're spending in marketing in order to attract people to the state. Is there a correlation between what they spend and what they get? What should we do? Dan, $6 million bucks, a lot of money, and I'm glad that we've got it. I'm glad to see the state is finally doing something. But Wild Adventures is a little bitty business. I'm one guy, little bitty business, and in Valdosta, Georgia, and our marketing expenditures, exclusive of salaries and other costs, is $8 million a year at Wild Adventures. $8 million versus the state of Georgia's got $6 million. What could we do if we looked at, the question is not how much should we increase, what percentage of increase. Hey, we doubled it, more than doubled. Wow. And that's great. Nobody should be, you know, feel mad about it, but we're looking at it the wrong way. We're looking at tourism the wrong way. It's not, well, we doubled that budget. What should we be spending on tourism? what should we be doing from a tax basis? What are the opportunities that are out there to create additional tourism development in the state of Georgia? How could we tap that money? I mean, the number of people that come to our state, of course, the stopovers in Atlanta are very brief, typically at Hartsfield. But when we start looking at the number of people that roll through there, is there an opportunity for us, by increasing our budgets and increasing the offerings that the state offers, to get some of those people to stay? I think the answer is yes. And I think it depends on how we look at it. What do we want it to be? And so I think what we need to do as a state, this is from a private business owner's perspective, if we value tourism, if we think that that industry that we have is worth exploring and exploiting, and creating additional opportunities for Georgians and additional tax revenue, if that's what we believe, then it's time that we take a hard look at it. It's time that we invest in tourism in Georgia in all fronts, in marketing, and investment in infrastructure, and investment in the industry itself. And there are many ways that we can do it, and we're already doing it in industries that are a little bigger in agriculture and a little smaller in manufacturing. If we would look at what we're doing in those industries and decided to offer some of those same opportunities, I don't know what tourism would be in Georgia. I don't think it would take a long period of time for it to become, like Florida, our #1 industry. The opportunities are great. The investment is not big. On behalf of the state, when we look at the grand scheme of things, it is just a decision of what do we want it to be. I'm open for questions. At this time, if I would like to ask questions, I'll do my best to answer those questions.
Kent, we appreciate that that presentation. That's remarkable. Stuart, John, do you have any questions?
No, Ken, I just want to tell you, I went to Cypress Gardens 4 times this year, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
No problem.
Great.
You've heard it how many times?
4 times.
Oh, this is my first time, so I enjoy hearing it. Florida. I think you said Florida, they sought you out when they got
Absolutely.
rumor that you were interested in Cypress Gardens. And they have these programs available, tax incentives and
That's correct.
and things of that nature. And I think what would be great if we don't already have that, I'd like to, if we could get some of that information in our
Sure.
hands.
We'd
I
be
think
happy
that'd
to provide it. The funding that came from the state primarily came, they have a fund called Florida Forever, in our case. And they tapped that $12 million of that funding that the state directly paid. And they wrote a check, a $12 million check, to the Trust for Public Land, which was a nonprofit land trust that acted as an intermediary in order to accomplish the purchase of Cypress Gardens. Polk County wrote a $2 million check. And theirs was reimbursed by the state, I believe. And I don't know the exact fund, but I can find out.
Well, let me ask you this also, because I want to question first in Polk County, Florida, and then bring it back around to Lowndes County, Georgia. How's the property zoned here in Georgia?
Our property is zoned, ours is a planned development commercial.
Okay.
And it's part of Lowndes County's urban growth area. But it is zoned, it was a planned development.
Now, I know this next question is getting a little out of the arena of what state incentives might can do, but as far as your local property taxes in Lowndes County, tell me a little bit about that. Is that stabilized, or is it like all of ours?
We are the third largest property taxpayer in Lowndes County. We spend about $700,000 a year in just property taxes. That's the cost of the company. And I know we have, again, as you look at the way it's approached, we did a study a couple of years ago. One of the issues that we had that limit our growth is the access to the park off I-75, 4-mile stretch of 2-lane country road. And on peak days, the road gets an F because all of a sudden we're putting 30,000 cars on it. And we asked for assistance in seeing that that road could be turned into a 4-lane road. So the park could continue to grow and not be choked off, and we've not been able to get that yet, either an investment from Lowndes County or. But the survey decided that we need to have there were alternative traffic routes, and the decision was the state and the county from the study needed to invest in road signs, as an example, that would guide people to the park and alternate road signs. Not one of those has been done yet, and that's been 2.5 years. We've asked, and it's just sort of, well, so-and-so's working on that, but the difference is not that nobody doesn't want to do it. It's just not high on the list of priorities. And in Florida, on the other hand, Cypress Gardens, when we reopened it, we have a multitude of highway road signs, both off of I-4 that is it's 20-some-odd miles, that guide you all the way there. Throughout every route around Polk County on state routes, has those kind of signage. So the difference is just a mindset. I mean, that's the point. Now, we pay property taxes in Polk County, too. And
that was my next question.
We do. We pay property. I didn't ask for that. I missed that one. But honestly, if we had asked for an exemption from taxes, I think we'd have gotten it.
On your property taxes?
On the property taxes down there. There's no question in my mind.
You pay about the same there?
About the same.
As you do in Georgia?
About the same.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can I have a question? In Georgia, for instance, if you were in the manufacturing business, you could get your local government to a tax-free municipal bond issue.
That's correct.
In Florida, is that available for tourism?
It is available in a limited way, yes. Florida uses other, like they did the Florida Forever Fund,
sure,
to provide a direct investment. A little different than the way that, and that's probably not the way to go, to be honest with you. I mean, I'm not suggesting the state write checks to private businesses to accomplish that. I think there are ways to do it, and I think that tax exemptions on financing opportunities is probably is a solid way for the state to be able to do that, and that way we're not using state checks. The state does give up some taxability, but what you gain is you allow private investors and enterprises to invest by purchasing debt.
Right. The state's going to give up the taxes, but they're also going to make the sales tax from
they're
the
going to make the
operation.
sales tax, which is a direct. I mean, it's immediate. They're direct and immediate. And in tourism, unlike any other industry, I mean, I don't know of anything else. I mean, I'm trying to think about industries, and the amount of money we spend to get to land a single industry. Maybe it employs a few hundred folks. Maybe in some cases, maybe it's a few thousand. But those are few and far in between. But the investment beyond the property, plant, and equipment that initially goes into those things, and some continuation, is primarily, other than in direct spend, that may happen if I'm an industry and buy tools and things like that in the local economy. But the reality is that they're buying more machine tools. Most of those are not even made in Georgia, for sure, and not in the U.S. So, I mean, in the case of the printing business, there's not a printing press that I could buy made in the United States.
Right.
So I'm provided. So it's not a benefit that because I got this tax exemption, that I have the opportunity to go and buy, and so the product that we were selling primarily was sold outside the state of Georgia. So that Georgia didn't, what's the benefit? Not suggesting it's not a good idea, because I think it does encourage investment and industry.
But you believe it would help more
But I
to
think
make
it
it
would
available
help
for tourism?
I think in tourism's case, you're gonna see a much bigger return. I'm not suggesting the return to manufacturing or to agriculture is unwarranted at all. Not suggesting that. But I think the return would be multi-fold as it compares to the investment that we place in the other industries. And like I said, I've been in both. And the differences in the availability for a manufacturer versus a tourism, somebody that's going to spend the same dollars or more. In our case, we have an $80 million investment in Lowndes County in tourism. $80 million. We like to continue to do more, but it's tough to do so. I mean, you know, it's a cyclical seasonal business in our case, and so you know you have to kind of walk through it before you can run. But we've run pretty fast over a period of years to put that kind of money out. But if we'd have had that availability on tax exempt financing, and we'd have had an availability of a sales tax exemption that we paid, I would dare say that instead of attracting 1.5 million guests to Lowndes County and to Georgia, that we would probably be closer to 2 million guests. And you know, because it would have opened up the opportunity. In my case, every time I earn $1, I invest $1.25 back into the business, or $2 back into the business has been usually the case. And the same thing would have occurred. I mean, the ability not to have to spend money on higher finance costs, the ability not to pay sales tax on major pieces of equipment purchases to drive the business would have been reinvested and would have driven further business.
Okay.
What in Lowndes County? What is the combined local and state sales tax down there?
The percentage, 7%.
The sales tax break on new equipment that you talked about. Have you had that conversation with Lowndes County, and if so, are they offering you any hopes of something like that on equipment?
No, I haven't talked directly to Lowndes County.
Okay.
I know we've inquired and through our professionals, and just indicated that it's just not available. It's not something that's available, and I think the counties are going to follow the state's lead.
Right.
If the state provides an exemption, the counties probably would. If the state doesn't provide an exemption, the counties are not going to step out and do that. In almost any case.
You mentioned your peak season. When roughly is your peak season?
Our season in Valdosta, peak season runs from early March through the start of school.
And that kind of leads into my next somewhat controversial question. I've heard from a lot of people in your industry, the tourism attraction industry, that have issues with the early school dates. The school starting back as early as it does. It affects visitors, possible part-time employment there. Can you elaborate on that some and the impact it might be having?
I can tell you that it's a significant cost to the tourism industry. We used to, when I look back, when I say the old days, I'm talking about 10 years ago, school started around the 20th of August.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, July and August were our 2 peak months of the year. And once school starts, revenues in tourism dry up. When I say they don't just fall off, they just stop, essentially. And it doesn't matter what it is, but when parents make the shift, kids go to school, we now have a lot of other things that distract us. Kids going to afternoon football practice or whatever sports practice, with Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, but all those things start up during that time. And what's happened in our school calendar is it's not just been a shift in the timing, it's been a change away from what we call the traditional school calendar, where kids essentially had a short break at Christmas and a day or two for spring break, and then a long summer, essentially almost 3 months off. And what's now changed is for whatever reason, we have a series of willy-nilly, as this school is off for this day, this one's off for this day. In our local county, the 2 systems don't even observe the same holidays. They're at different times.
So that's your balanced calendar driving you crazy.
It drives you nuts. And with the early school start, what we've done is, in tourism, we've traded what I would call good weather days, times when people want to be out. Now, we go to school still 180 days.
Yeah.
But now we're off an extra week in January and 2 days over here and a day over here at times when that are not conducive for most tourism-related travel. It's just the weather's not great in the winter. People, and we're fortunate to be in the climate we're in. But people don't want to go to the beach. I can tell you that right now. In January, there's no desire to do that unless you just want to go walk around and look at the shore. But if the kids don't want to go because it's too cold, the water's too cold. They certainly don't want to go to a water park, They don't want to go ride roller coasters most of the time either because the temperatures are too cold. So I would say that probably the shift in the school schedule probably directly to the new type of schedule we have probably cost us about 8% of our annual visits. And so it's pretty significant. State of Florida, started following a similar calendar as Georgia did about the same time, but has now just in the past legislative session, because of the realization, also somebody woke up and said, wow, what have we done? And typically more of Florida has better year-round weather. I mean, Central Florida, in January most days are 75 degrees, and in Valdosta they're 60. So, and in North Georgia it's 50, and not near as conducive to go out and do the outdoor activities. But they've changed the school start date, and now by mandate, state law, beginning next school year, no school may start without a special exception from the Department of Education, signed into law, may start prior to 14 days prior to Labor Day. So you return to a more traditional calendar. It'll be interesting to see, do they pepper the calendar, do they just shift when it ends and starts, or they decide to return to a more traditional, the way some of us in this room, certainly me, went to school, where you didn't have a whole lot of holidays. There were a few, but you had a longer, more traditional summer.
So in Florida, they basically have 2.5 months.
That's correct.
Vacation time.
That's right, instead of 2.
Yeah.
And it's going to be interesting to see what the impact is on the business. I would expect, as a matter of fact, in our modeling, we expect that their change down there will add $2 million in additional revenue to Cypress Gardens next year and $1 million at Wild Adventures, because we have about 52% of our visitors come from Florida at Wild Adventures.
Well, you're in Valdosta with Wild Adventures now. When can we expect to see you in other parts of the state?
After I settle a big hurricane insurance claim, my ability to go do that will be certainly changed. But we certainly have an interest in growing tourism in other parts of the state. It's a great business overall, and I enjoy it. And but at the same time, it has to be an opportunity, because in the type of investment we're looking at, you have to seek outside investment. Like I said, I'm a little guy, and certainly to invest in our 2 parks, $160 million, requires me to seek both all sorts of outside funding, and whether it's financing or whether it's equity. I believe the more incentives that were available, and that you would lower the threshold likelihood of being successful, would make it more likely that you would see additional entities created as well.
Yeah, go ahead.
Again, if I can ask you one more question. We've talked about balanced school calendars. We've discussed tax-free municipal bonds, different programs. If you could fix 1 or 2 things, what would be at the top of your list?
Wow.
That you think would impact the industry, the best bang for the buck?
Okay, what I would do is I would say school calendar would be in the top 2 or 3 definitely. And then other than that, I would think that some sort of tax incentive, and I understand what you're asking me, just pick one.
Can't do them all.
Can't do them all. I understand that.
Absolutely.
So would the question be, would you suggest that the sales tax on equipment be erased, or would you suggest the tax exempt financing? Without doing some real hard calculations, I couldn't tell you what would make the most sense, but I think either of them would be a step in the right direction, either one of them, and would provide additional tourism-related investment.
Thanks. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. Thank you so much. Next is Dan Rowe, Commissioner Rowe. Just step right up to the podium with. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate your flexibility in allowing me to move from the morning session to the afternoon session. And I really do hate that I missed this morning session, because I understand that the presenters did a very good job of articulating, the need for tourism in the state of Georgia. Tourism is a big business. $16.6 billion of direct tourism expenditures, and a direct expenditure is when a traveler takes $1 out of his pocket and hands it to one of our private sector businesses, like the ones, Kent Bisher at Wild Adventures, or Mark Smith with Mulberry, or Doug Lambert with Southeastern Hospitality. It's, the dollars that flow into those organizations are critically important. Tourism also employs 217,000 of our residents and generates $1.3 billion of state and local tax revenues. I mean, tourism, is an investor in what Georgia does. And what we're trying to do is really, through some of the leadership that you and the House of Representatives has shown, is continue to grow tourism. Two of the presenters today are members of the Georgia Tourism Foundation, which was created by Senate Bill 125 last year, and Governor Perdue appointed, Kent Bisher and Mark Smith to represent the private sector on the Tourism Foundation to really help us continue to leverage public and private partnerships. And the industry is at a very critical time right now. Things are going in the right direction. Through August, Georgia led all the southeastern states in the growth of hotel revenues. So our hotel community is growing faster than surrounding states. And in the month of July, we led the nation, in hotel revenue growth. And we're getting ready to embark on a very bold initiative. Since 1993, Georgia, as Kent alluded to, has the 8th largest tourism economy in the state and in the nation. Ahead of us is California, with $77 billion. Florida is $48 billion. Then you get into Texas, New York, Illinois, and Nevada. And they're all in the $25 billion and up. And we're sitting at 16.6. The state of Pennsylvania is just ahead of us. 4 years ago, the state of Pennsylvania was behind us, and the state of New Jersey was ahead of us. New Jersey has lost its way. Pennsylvania has gotten very smart in its marketing. And we need to move out of 8th place. We need to move to 7th place. We need to be focused on how do we get ahead. And the reason why is because of the jobs and the economic opportunity that are created by tourism. We've identified 5 very critical trends which will help us get to that point. Nationally, residents of a state travel in-state half the time and out-of-state half the time. So when you went to Florida to Cypress Gardens 4 times this year, you would have taken 4 trips in-state. Now in Georgia, we don't travel like everybody else. We only stay home 37% of the time. So we feel that if we start moving toward the national average of 50-50, that we have a great opportunity to capture more visitors to the state as well as more revenue for the state. The second critical area that we have is we need to keep the folks who are visiting Georgia now coming back. We need to show them the hospitality that Georgia is known for. We need to show them, continue to educate them on what we have to offer. The third one is we need to take advantage of all those folks that are driving through Georgia, go on their way to somewhere else. We calculate there's about 15 million people that travel to Georgia for one reason, and that reason is because we're in the way. We're in the way from where they are to where they want to be. And along I-95, it's absolutely critical because it's 112 miles from South Carolina to Florida. And if you didn't try hard, you could miss the state of Georgia and not spend any of your tourism dollars here. So we need to do a better job of peeling people off of the interstates to get them to stop and spend the night. If you're a traveler just passing through for the day, you spend about $40 a person in the state. If you spend the night, it goes up to about $103. I mean, that's a significant change. We also need to continue to leverage our international efforts. Under Commissioner Lesser and Governor Perdue, we have really been focused on tearing down the silos within the Department of Economic Development and working more strategic across the lines. We work very closely with our Global Commerce Division, making sure that we are taking advantage of every opportunity that comes to pass. Our Global Commerce efforts, the 10 offices that we have around the state, around the country, around the world, are very important for us. Up until recently, the global commerce folks wouldn't sell tourism, and the tourism folks wouldn't talk about commerce. And now, we're all working together to really continue to sell Georgia in a very strong and productive way. And our friends with Delta Airlines, they're here today, and they're also very close partners with us as they have changed from a legacy to a flag carrier, opening up new markets around the world. And joining you at the table is absolutely one of our biggest champions of the tourism industry. As the chairman of the Economic Development Tourism Committee in the House, Ron Stevens, and he was an absolute supporter of the tourism initiatives. It was in this hotel about 5 years ago, that the tourism industry really started to get galvanized and to focus on how do we grow awareness and how do we grow tax revenues. And for that, Mr. Chairman, I thank you. But Delta allows us to partner with them in international destinations where they're opening up new markets. They're opening up new markets for tourists, people who can come and spend their time with us. The folks in global commerce are actively selling tourism, and then we also partner with the Hemisphere Inc. Group, which occupies part of our building, to continue to sell Georgia tourism across the world. Those are the things that we believe, if we execute strategies on each count, that we will increase tourism in the state of Georgia in a strategic but in a very large and bold way. Our new marketing campaigns, which we are rolling out, also take advantage of the strategic nature of what we do. Kent is right, $6 million is a lot more than what we had. We have been very fortunate that you guys have had the foresight to continue to fund and increase tourism. My predecessor also did a very good job in making sure that every dollar that went to the Department of Economic Development was spent in the right way. Commissioner Lesser and our marketing department continue that trend. And so we are doing very good with what we have. We're probably one of the most efficient states in the nation when it comes to the tourism dollars generated for the state dollars that are invested in tourism. But we do need to continue to work very hard and to do more. It is a great time to be here. I appreciate the work of your committee in taking a serious look at the business incentives specifically related to tourism, because we believe there is a greater opportunity to expand Georgia tourism through enhancing our tourism products that we have available. And with that, I'll answer any questions that you have. And I thank you for your time.
Oh, well, thank you for being here. And let me also reiterate my gratitude for Representative Ron Stevens joining us, Chairman of Economic Development Tourism in the House. And did I see Representative Carter? Yes. Representative Carter's here also. They both are local folks to the Savannah area. Thank you all for joining us. John, do you have a question?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, just one real quick one. Have you noticed statewide a difference in your taxes collected, the impact on tourism because of the balanced school calendars as well?
Statewide, we have not seen that because in individual communities, the impacts are different in individual operators. I know at Wild Adventures it's an issue. With Six Flags, it's an issue. With Callaway Gardens, it's been an issue along the coast of Georgia. But if you look at the aggregate, the tourism taxes generated by tourism in August are about this. They continue to track upwards.
Thank you.
Just a remedial question. The convention business that we have here in Georgia, is that factored in? Is that part of tourism?
It is absolutely. Tourism is defined by the expenditures by people who are traveling, for everything other than commuting to work. Okay. So when business travel comes, whether they're knocking on doors at one of the new IKEA distribution center that's coming online, or whether they're two parents, 2.5 kids going to the beach for a week. All of
Okay.
that is included.
This next question, Kent brought it up earlier when he was talking about sales tax exemption for equipment, and I'll direct this to you if you'd like to answer, and also Department of Revenue, because I remember us in the last couple of years doing things of this nature. One, when the Georgia Aquarium was being constructed, and I think even now, while the new Coca-Cola Museum, I think we passed some legislation that gave specific sales tax exemptions for construction and equipment. Can you, and those are tourism-related
Oh, absolutely.
sales tax break. Would you talk about that a little bit, and if that, I believe those were isolated tax exemptions, and how that can have more statewide application without us passing special legislation all the time.
Well, and this is, I'm not going to the state policy for the Department of Economic Development. We are part of the executive branch, and this is, I see that, the sales tax exemptions that help tourism product get built, are important, because if we are, tourism provides jobs, and tourism provides new opportunities for investments. Every time a visitor comes to the aquarium or comes to Wild Adventures, that's new dollars that are flowing into the community. So it continues to roll over, by every time a visitor comes. And one of the standards within the tourism industry, it's 9 times easier to keep a visitor than to get a new one. So people tend to come back. And if you introduce them to a community and they have a quality experience, they will come back and visit you time and again. And that really does have long-lasting ripple effects. And tourism also provides opportunities, for people all the way up and down the socioeconomic ladder. I would dare to say that everybody in this room at some point in time in their life has been employed by the tourism industry, whether they were working on a golf course, a lifeguard, at a hotel swimming pool, or flipping burgers. We've all done it, and so we provide a great work experience, for people, young people, as well as allowing people to transition through time. And I think Bertie Marcus is probably the most successful tourism person we have in the state of Georgia right now. Ranking in the top, the richest people in the world.
Thank you for that. Also, on that question, does revenue, can y'all add any to that, any details of the special legislation that helped the aquarium and Coca-Cola Museum? And I can't remember, but maybe an idea of how much tax savings that allowed the aquarium and the museum?
I don't recall, Chairman Lewis, what the savings were. I just know that the aquarium has been a phenomenal success. Essentially, there's no exemption in the state for construction materials, either on a government project or a private project. And so for the first time, they started with the aquarium. Then they got the Symphony Hall, which hasn't been built yet. Then they went to the World of Coca-Cola, and then they did the Infantry Museum last year. I think essentially what that does is gives them a break on about half of the sales tax and about half the development costs. Generally, it's about 55, 45 on those costs, and 45% being tangible personal property and equipment at one end.
But the common denominator in those exemptions was tourism related.
Tourism.
That was
Yes.
the single qualifying factor that made that
Yeah,
happen.
because one of the few services the state taxes is admissions.
Yeah.
We get sales tax on admissions, so it makes all the sense in the world.
Well, thank you. My apologies for not mentioning the Symphony Hall. I did recall that once it reminded me of it. Any other questions or comments? Dan, thank you.
Thank
We
you very
appreciate
much.
that. Thanks a lot. Let's see, next we have, hope I'm pronouncing this last name right, Mike Vacure? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Close enough.
Thank you for being here. Go
Thank
right
you very
ahead.
much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, for giving me the opportunity to appear today. I'm Mike Vacwer, and am appearing today on behalf of the Georgia Restaurant Association. We have a particular piece of legislation that we are interested in moving forward with during this upcoming session of the General Assembly, and we are calling it the Good Samaritan Sales Tax Exemption. Basically, the situation as it exists now is that if one of my members wants to donate prepared food to a soup kitchen, they are in fact liable for paying the use tax on that contribution. So they are looking at anywhere from 6, 7, 8% added on cost, in addition to the costs that would be added for packaging and delivery and the like. So one of two things is happening. Either we have, number one, a number of restaurants who are doing the right thing and donating these prepared food items at the end of the day to an organization that can help support the poorest of the poor, or number two, they're throwing this food away. And that is not the kind of activity that we think is very beneficial. So we are requesting that the statute be amended. There was legislation that passed last session that exempted the sale of food, qualified food and beverage to a nonprofit organization for use in a soup kitchen and the like from sales tax. But we didn't realize that the Revenue Department had some time ago made a determination that the use of these items was subject to taxation as well. Not only will we be bringing that forward, but an experience that we had several weeks ago at a meeting in Washington brought to light the fact that in the wake of the Katrina relief effort in New Orleans, there were a large number of restaurants who were donating thousands upon thousands of meals. One restaurant in particular donated 77,000 meals, not only to folks who were displaced, but to all the relief workers as well. And the more we looked at this, the more we started thinking, well, how does that fit in with the Georgia Code? And unfortunately, if we were to have such a natural disaster under the current revenue code, those meals that would be donated for the public good would also be subject to use tax. So we're working on some language that will tie that kind of humanitarian relief effort and move it out of the revenue code. And so with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have.
All right, thanks. Anyone?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for doing that. Let's see, Lynn Pitts? There, yeah, please come up. Yeah, go right ahead.
First, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Representative Stevens, thank you for allowing me to be here today. I am Lynn Pitts with the Savannah Economic Development Authority, and I'm going to do a little change of thought here away from tourism. CETA is responsible for economic development in Chatham County for manufacturing, warehouse distribution, office and technology development. So the tourism side of things is handled very well by the Convention and Visitors Bureau and Department of Economic Development and others. So I'd like to talk to you a little bit today about some things that we would like to see done in terms of business incentives for our part of the economy. Let me start, and I don't know if you can see the slides or not, but give you a little bit of an overview, and I'm going to take a guess. This thing will move it forward.
It's definitely one of those buttons. Very picture that one. The one to your right.
There we go. Too many, yeah. Okay. Well, first off, in Savannah, Chatham County, and the whole the coastal region here, we like to say our economy is based upon a five-legged stool. You start with port-related industry, the way the city and this part of the state was developed around the river, around the port. As you see, we hit 2 million TEUs and surpassed Charleston for the first time last year as the fourth busiest container port in the United States. You also have a number of other waterborne commodity-type industries, everything from import of oil to export of kaolin, chips and rock, and other commodities. The second part is our manufacturing. We're a strong manufacturing center here, everything from the wood products, forest products, pulp and paper, to probably the top of our line is Gulfstream Aerospace that makes the top corporate jets in the world. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that as we go through. Third part of our stool, or third leg of our stool, is the knowledge-based businesses. These are the technology companies that are coming out of our colleges and universities here, and this is the thing I really want to talk to you about, how we're trying to grow that here in the Chatham County area. Here we go. Number 4 is our military and the government services here. We're very proud of the fact that Fort Stewart and Hunter Army Airfield are located here. As you can see, they bring in over $1 billion of revenue into the region. And then last, but certainly not least, is the tourism industry that you've heard a lot about today, and I won't even attempt to get into, but it is a very important part of our economy and something that we appreciate and support. Let's talk about the port for a second. It is the fastest growing port in the United States. They have had 100% growth in the number of containers that have come through there since 2001. One of the big reasons for that is the explosion of business coming from China. We have more direct service to Asia, and read that to be China, Southeast Asia, and Japan than any other port on the East Coast. Two of our big success stories in the last 12 months have been big import centers. Target Corporation, the retail store, about a year ago, last week, announced a 2 million square foot facility that will employ over 450 people with at least a $65 million investment. Within 2 months, IKEA, the Swedish furniture company, also came in and announced a similar type of project that it build out will be 1.6 million square feet. To give you a feel for how big that is, this is a picture that was taken just a few weeks ago. You've got Target, which is the big, that's 2 billion square feet of building. It's hard to really tell. But that is a semi-truck trailer. So just the sheer magnitude and size of this thing is enormous. It's a half mile from one end of that building to the other, a little less than 1,000 feet across. So concrete's at a premium in this part of the world right now, as you can imagine. Across the street, under construction, is IKEA. So those are 2 port-related projects that we're very proud of and are helping our economy along. Moving on to manufacturing. You read a lot today about, especially with China, that manufacturing is all going offshore. That manufacturing in the United States is dead or dying. That's not happening in our county. From 2004 to 2005, our manufacturing employment actually increased. 2004, we averaged a little over 13,000 manufacturing employees. As you see, in last year we had a little under 14,500. And you see the wages, the average wages that they're paying there. It's very, very important. They bring over $1 billion just in wages and benefits to the citizens of this area. Let me talk about a couple of real success stories here. Let me go to the bottom one first, Georgia Pacific Gypsum. They reopened a mothball gypsum wallboard plant about 3 years ago and came back in here. They were bringing gypsum rock from Canada through the port and making wallboard. They were so successful with that reinstituted establishment that earlier this year they announced a new expansion of $115 million. So you can see that part of our economy is going good. Gulfstream is something I really wanted to talk about. I can't say enough about Gulfstream as a corporate citizen and what they mean to this part of Georgia and this part of the United States, for that matter. Dan Russo is going to make a presentation after me about something totally unrelated to what I'm talking about today. But he's got some numbers there that show that at present they have something in the neighborhood of over 4,000 full-time employees out at Gulfstream right now, and over 1,000 full-time contractors on top of that. They announced a major expansion earlier this year of at least $300 million and at least 1,100 to 1,500 new employees over the next 5 years. Now, what's interesting about this in terms of business incentives is when they started this project, when they were looking at where they could expand their operations, they hired one of the big national consulting groups, did a study of the surrounding states and what their business environment and what their business incentives were. Georgia ranks very well in terms of business environment. Business incentives, we were dead last compared to Alabama, South Carolina, even Florida in terms of what they were looking for. But I will say that a combination of some discretionary funds that the Department of Economic Development, the governor, were able to put on the table, and through basically the fact that Gulfstream already had a major investment here, or a local company, they went on and did this project here. Here's one that got away a few years ago. About 2 years ago, Hubble Lighting Company, were based in Spartanburg, South Carolina, and were looking to expand and possibly relocate their headquarters. 500 employees, white-collar company, white-collar type jobs in the headquarters. They are the largest division of a large holding company called Hubble Incorporated out of Connecticut. They finally chose to move just a few miles up the road in South Carolina for a number of reasons, but incentives had something to do with it. We've got a headquarters tax credit that allows us to use payroll taxes as an incentive, but it's very, very difficult to get the Department of Revenue and others to agree to which jobs actually meet those requirements. And so the amount of money we were able to put on the table there was not enough. Job tax credit. You've probably heard this from others, but the job tax credit for most companies is very, very ineffective. It just doesn't mean anything to these companies, and it's not really thought of as being an incentive. And finally, at that time especially, the REBA funds were insufficient to able us to put enough money on the table to move these people here. Now, I know Chris Clark of the Department of Economic Development made a presentation to this group earlier this year, and I got these slides from him, and I will just reinforce what he said there. But as you can see, you look down through there, job and tax credits for payroll. You've heard other things about sales tax on construction equipment, making it much easier for jobs to qualify for the headquarters tax credit. These are things that we support, and we think will make a difference as we move forward. Here's what I really came to talk about, and that is our knowledge-based businesses. As you see from this chart, if you can read it, we have a little over 300 companies that we qualify as knowledge-based businesses in Chatham County. And that's significant for a community of our size. What's really interesting there is almost 300 of those are less than 25 employees. They are very small companies. They qualify for virtually no state tax incentives. And that's what I'd like to talk to you about. Again, going from Chris Clark's earlier presentation, there are a number of things that they are proposing to help small businesses, because that's what most of these companies are in our area. And I won't go through these point by point, but again, I will reinforce what they said and say they're important. Let's go in the right direction. One thing I want to leave you with is something that we found to be very important to these companies, and not just the very small ones, but the medium-sized technology companies that we would be trying to recruit into the Chatham County area. We need cheap, short-term real estate. We need business incubators or business accelerators, as some people call them. Georgia Tech and the Advanced Technology Development Center, we're very fortunate, has a facility here that's very successful. We would ask that you enlarge and expand that facility and help us make it more flexible. A lot of those companies are very technology-based, and you have to be that way. You have to be involved with basically Georgia Tech to get into that facility. We see that a lot of other companies that aren't as R&D or technology-based can be started here and grown if we have a more flexible business accelerator. So we're suggesting sort of a joint venture between either ATDC, the state, or other groups, and the local community. We're willing to put money into this and have a larger incubator, a larger accelerator that we can bring all types of different companies in and help them grow. We had a business gaming, one of the video game companies that designed those games for the young people. They were interested in moving out of the Washington, D.C. area. But they were a young company, very little money. They needed help in moving them people. Well, that's cash. The only thing that we thought we might be able to do is give them a year or two free rent. If we had a facility like this, that would offset their relocation costs, and hopefully we would have got that company here, which they ended up coming here. One way to try to offset the cost of this type of facility is to explore various state surplus properties. And I'll give an example. A few years ago, there still is a building here that was occupied by DFAX, the state group. We made a proposal. They moved to a new building. It was surplus property, and we made a proposal that we, the local community, take on the building, refurbish it, because it needed some major refurbishing, fill it up with these young technology companies, and give it back to the state as a viable piece of real estate. We got caught between conflicting objectives within state government. The State Properties Commission was under a mandate to maximize what the state could get for these type of buildings, and you can't blame that, but that is what won out here. The building was sold, and we're still looking for a business accelerator. So that is one thing that I would hope that you would look into as you deliberate next year during the General Assembly. Thank you.
Let me ask you on the accelerator program. So if I heard you right, that's mainly lending itself to a particular type of industry, a high-tech industry, I'm assuming, is what you're allowing it to facilitate.
Well, I think what we're seeing with the Georgia Tech, the ATDC, they want these companies to be affiliated very strongly with some type of research or some affiliation with the university. We're saying that's good, and we like to see that, but we'd like some more flexibility for some companies that, say, aren't as technology-oriented, that are young, growing companies, that just more flexibility in who gets in there and how long they get to stay.
Right. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Lynn, over the past 4 or 5 years, we've got in fact, just recently, we've got a designation by the Lafler report that some of, I'm sure, have spoke about before, a couple of weeks ago, which designates Georgia as the #1 state in the country for potential future economic development. And I'm sure you probably know about that. And along with some of the things that we've done over the past few years, like single-factor corporate tax, and of course, our state surplus project that we were talking about a little bit earlier that we couldn't come through with. Can you tell me in a real summary form what you would like to see for CETA to give you an edge on some of the projects that we've lost looking at in the rearview mirror?
You know, it all comes down to money. It comes down to cash. And so whether that is discretionary money that the state is able to put forward, whether it is the job tax credits against state income tax is not money, because most of these companies can figure out a way not to pay state income tax for a significant period of time anyway. If you can put the payroll tax from the employees and give that back to the company, that's real cash. And if I have to say if there's one single thing that I'd ask you to look at, that would be it. South Carolina, I spent a short period of my career over in Charleston. And in every single county in South Carolina, you get payroll tax credits on any manufacturing facility that starts over there. So, again, looking at the competition in other states, that's what we're up against.
All right, Lynn, thank you.
Thank you.
For that. We have one last presentation, but before I recognize Dan, and Dan, you can certainly be making your way up here. You can be making your way up here if you like. But before we do, let me thank all of those of you who did present to us earlier today. This meeting was primarily focused on tourism and business incentives as it relates to our tourism industry. As we all have heard, that is arguably the #1 or #2 industry in the state of Georgia, I believe. And it's a very important part of our economic development. And I think you have some folks in the General Assembly that we have a mindset to try and do something to accommodate that, to take as much advantage of that opportunity as we can. So I do want to express my gratitude to all of you who showed up here to make a presentation and some comments on those incentives. Of course, I want to thank the staff that helped set this up, Abby and Brent. Great job once again. And Joy, where did Joy go? I know she was an integral part in setting all this up. I want to express our appreciation to her as well. When I was contacted about this last presenter, it is about Gulfstream specifically, and they are a local manufacturing company here. And so I was real interested in wanting to hear from them since we're in their hometown, so to speak. And also it's a good segue into our next business incentive meeting, which will be in the Athens area, and there will be more details to follow. But that meeting, we're going to be concentrating on business incentives for manufacturing. And so this is a good segue into that, and of course I would encourage any of you that would like to attend that meeting to do so. We will be dealing with incentives for manufacturing. And just like we have done at this meeting and the previous meeting that we've had, we will have details out to you through email and so forth from Abby as we're able to have facilities available and work up an agenda for us to discuss on that at that time. And Abby will be getting that out to you probably as early as next week if we can. And then your response is very helpful. Any of you who would like to be there and to make a presentation or just show up and testify perhaps, it's good to know that so we can help schedule the time on that day. We do know the date is October the 11th. That is a Wednesday, and we're looking to have it in the Athens area dealing with manufacturing incentives. So, last on the program on purpose, so we could lead right into that. Dan, go ahead. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Again, I appreciate the opportunity to speak before the committee. I won't take up too much of your time. You're right, it is a nice segue. Gulfstream is the largest employer in the county and one of the largest manufacturing companies in the state. Gulfstream moved to Georgia in 1967. It's been here almost 40 years. Most of Gulfstream's products, the G450, the G500, the G550, the 350, all of its large cabin aircraft, are all manufactured right here in Georgia and have been since 1967. One thing that has happened over the last 10 years is the business aviation industry has enjoyed some upswings and some downswings, but mostly upswings, and our fleet size, the number of Gulfstreams flying in the air, has doubled over the last 10 years. Gulfstream, as far as Georgia's employment levels, Lynn Pitt spoke to it. It's actually Georgia currently, here in Georgia, between Savannah and Brunswick, we have two facilities, Savannah being by far the largest. We employ over 5,000 people, and in addition, another 1,000 temporary or job shop workers. So in addition to that, we've pledged to add at least 1,100 new jobs over the next 7 years, upwards of 1,500, if things continue to go well, so as Lynn spoke to. One of the things we're doing is working closely with the community and a lot of local universities to help train Georgia citizens to come work for Georgia. The labor pool being important. We're working with Savannah Tech locally and Armstrong University, and then, of course, Georgia Tech, the University of Georgia system, to develop engineers and training programs to get people qualified to work at Gulfstream. We want to hire local people. The Gulfstream facility expansion that Lynn mentioned is the most aggressive expansion that Gulfstream's ever undertaken in its history. And Gulfstream is part of General Dynamics Corporation, a broader company. It's the largest expansion General Dynamics has ever undertaken in its corporate history. So over $300 million will be invested through 2011 in new and renovated facilities. The current aircraft service center that sits out at the airport is the fourth largest non-commercial service center for aircraft in the world. We're looking to double that size because of the fleet size doubling, because of new aircraft. We're selling around 100 aircraft a year, give or take, over the last couple of years. So with that expansion comes a need for warranty and service work. And so the goal is to double that. We've leased some property on the southwest quadrant of the airport, and we've started construction on the new service center, which will be built in 2 phases. The problem with the service center in Georgia is that we're at a competitive disadvantage. This is not a tax that affects Georgia, it's a tax that affects Gulfstream's customers. In that there is currently a tax on repair parts used to repair the aircraft for planes that come into our service center that doesn't exist in 15 to 20 other states around the country. It doesn't exist in Florida and South Carolina. South Carolina has a cap of like $300. But this isn't really a regional issue because of the movability of the aircraft. This is a national issue. There are 15 to 20 other states where if they want to get their airplane repaired, serviced, or whatever, they can go somewhere else and not pay the sales tax. So what it means is they're not coming here. And That means that we're not employing as many people in the service center as we'd like to. It means that while we hope to double it in size, if the business doesn't warrant that we'll delay that plan until the business does warrant it. And so what we're asking is for a flyaway exemption on the repair parts. And I see a couple of representatives from Delta in the room to note that Georgia legislation currently exempts repair parts for commercial carriers. The Georgia Revenue Code already exempts repair parts being sold to the U.S. government, U.S. government sales, so affecting Lockheed Martin. Okay, so vis-a-vis similar industries in the state, Gulfstream's at a competitive disadvantage in that regard. So what we're asking for is a flyaway exemption, meaning that if Home Depot, who's based here in Georgia, brings its plane in the service center, it will pay its fair share of Georgia tax as a Georgia taxpayer. But what we're trying to do is bring in the lost revenue. The additional revenue, even with single source sales factor, will generate additional income tax for the state because it will be Georgia sourced work, and so it will be a Georgia sale subject to income tax.
So what this is proposing is that when someone in Florida brings their plane up here for you to service, that Florida person will not pay sales tax on the items you use to repair that plane. However, a Georgia person would.
Correct.
That's what I
Correct. One of the things in sort of sticking with the theme of this meeting in tourism is that generally speaking, when a plane comes into our service center, it stays in the hangar anywhere from 5 to 10 days, depending on the size of the job. And so when it comes in, the pilots, the crew, anybody, the owner of the plane, they're spending time here in Savannah. There's, tourism is Savannah's #1 industry, as I heard Representative Stevens talk about it at a meeting last week. And so they're staying in our hotels downtown, they're eating at the restaurants. It's a big boost to the community. And so the more people we can bring in, the better it is for this community locally.
Any questions? All right. Well, we sure do appreciate you coming up here and sharing that with us. This is, like I said, a great segue into our next incentives meeting, which is October the 11th, where we're dealing with manufacturing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And again, let me express my gratitude to all of you. Is there any last burning comments from anyone out in our audience? Any quick word or comment? All right. Anyone up here at the table, John? Yes, sir. Chairman? All right. Well, that seems to do it. Let me again thank all of you for coming, and we will adjourn.